Welcome back to Humble Hospitality. I am Doug Poole. To my right, Mr. Kyle Green himself.
Morning, Doug.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Excellent. Yourself?
If I was any better, I gotta think of a new line for that. People tell me that they hate when I say if I was any better, I'd be twins.
Yeah.
And I only say it because a friend of mine used to say it all the time. And then he passed away, and it's like,
Does it just mean you'd be doubly great?
I would be double.
Just say you'd be triplets then.
I'd be double DP.
Ooh, that's.
Don't even go there.
I won't. We've already had enough bloopers this morning.
Oh yeah, we have.
Speaking of this morning, it's Monday.
It is.
Easter.
Yep.
Easter Monday. Apparently, all the kids are off from school. I didn't have that when I was in school.
Yeah.
A lot of excellent things that they have that we don't have. That's all right.
Yeah.
That's what makes us stronger.
Yeah. I didn't have tablets. I probably would have been a better student.
No, you wouldn't have.
No, you're
No,
right.
you wouldn't have. You'd still be. You would have been DJing in fourth grade on the History Channel.
It's my favorite thing to see in my yearbook is a picture of me from prom, DJing prom.
Oh, that's pretty legit.
Yeah.
Well, prodigy.
Yeah, I couldn't find a date, so I just decided I'd get paid instead.
It's funny how things don't change.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. So, how was your Easter?
It's good.
Yeah?
Good,
Yeah, Easter Bunny take care of you?
Yep, yeah. I did some golfing, ripped my thumb open.
Well, we're both a little injured today.
Yeah,
due to
right.
Sports
Yeah.
activities.
Yeah.
But that's right, though. You know what? It's good because we're still here. Still hold up the work. You injured your thumb. I pulled a shoulder muscle, which for some reason started messing with like my chest. And I thought I was having heart issues, but it's not.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, the text messages came through, and
Yeah.
we all had a mini little heart attack.
Indeed.
Indeed.
It's all right.
Yeah, that speaks to leadership, though. That for the busiest weekend in the year, basically, that you and I could both be afforded to not have to be at a restaurant
Yeah.
because you have excellent management teams in place.
100%. Well, that's law of reproduction, law of legacy, all those things we covered in episode 10. The little bit of decentralized command and trusting and empowering the team. You know, the great thing is Hutch's Kitchen had its busiest week ever, had its record day yesterday as far as guest counts and sales yesterday.
Excellent.
Oak and Ember was solid. Valentine's week was its busiest week, and Kyle G's. We had a little rain in the beginning part of the week, but it was still overall, a phenomenal week. So yeah, all the organizations all the teams were firing at very high levels, which is great. And bringing it back to leadership and humility and humbleness. One of the great things is we're going to cover some new material today, and I'm actually going to read from the book first before we discuss what book it is, because if I tell you what book it is and who it is, it's an autobiography of someone. And if I go into it, I want to keep the listeners and the viewers, whichever version you're watching, whether it's on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, server, whatever. I don't know. Google just does it for me when I listen to it, so I don't really know what it does. I just know that it works. I push play,
Yeah.
which seems to be a challenge for some people.
Not for me.
Not for you. You're a DJ. So if I tell you who this is, well, you already know. But if the viewers and the readers, if I tell you who this is, it's be pretty interesting because you're gonna have this predetermined vision of this individual in your mind, and I think it's important to understand kind of where it comes from, because one of the reasons why I'm covering this book. Number one, somewhere between culinary school and opening my first restaurant, the Brickwall Grill, which was in 2000 I graduated culinary school in 2006 and had the restaurant in 2007. So somewhere between there, I don't really remember when, I actually read this book. And it was it really kind of inspired me, right? And I could relate to some parts of it, not all of it, because, this individual had a drastically different history than I did. But there were some parts that I could kind of relate to. And then coming back and reading it, 15 years later, having experienced more, having gone through the restaurant industry more, it was a whole different perspective. And there are other parts that I remembered. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that part of the book. It was really cool. So, I'm going to read a little excerpt from the book, and then we're going to go into who it is and why it's important not only to go through this story, but also to how it can relate to leadership and the example that it gives to all of us in the restaurant industry. And even again, you don't have to be in the restaurant industry to appreciate this podcast. You can relate it back to whatever industry you're in, whether you're in I don't know, pharmacy, construction, sales, banking, whatever. I mean, there's always the underlying the underlying foundations that are key.
Right.
So, into the book we go. Next was the job in Port Glasgow. The prodigal son returns. Dad had all sorts of big ideas about that. His swimming career meant that everyone in the town knew him. They got a nice council house, and I think that Mum felt quite settled. If you haven't noticed, this individual's British. But Dad was all over the place. Fed up, he used to call it, a pathetic euphemism. The womanizing got steadily worse. He'd go out all night and not come back until the morning. Then he'd get changed and go straight off to the pool to work. By now I was around, and Mum was pregnant with my brother Ronnie. One morning, Dad came home and he announced that his car had been stolen. He made a big show of phoning the police to report it. Of course, it was complete bollocks. What had actually happened was that he'd been with a woman, had a few drinks, and knocked down an old man in what amounted to a hit and run. Despite his best efforts, it wasn't long before the police found out and was all over the papers. There was nothing else for it. Port Glasgow wasn't a very big place, and it was certainly too small for us now. We had to leave literally overnight. Diane was toddling. I mean, she was a toddler. Mm-hmm. You have to interpret some of this British terminology, which makes it kind of fun. I was in a pushchair and Mom was pregnant. But did he care? No, he didn't. It was straight onto the train to Birmingham, and who knows why. It could just as easily have been Newcastle or Liverpool. He may as well have stuck a pin in a map at random. We knew no one. We spent the night at New Street Station, waiting for the sun to come up so Dad could walk the streets looking for somewhere to live. What a desperate sight we must have been. You can all too easily imagine people walking past looking down at the pavement in their embarrassment. We found a room in a shared house. Amazingly, Dad only got probation and a fine for the hit and run, and he soon picked up a job as a welder. The room was horrible, or so Mom tells me. We just had to make the best of it. We shared a kitchen, in fact, a cooker in the hall, and a bathroom with another family. Meanwhile, Dad joined an Irish band, and all the usual kinds of women were soon hanging on to his every word. If we went out on a Friday night, you were lucky if you saw him again before Sunday. Needless to say, this welding soon went by the way. He wanted to spend more time with the band. He was convinced, despite all evidence to the contrary, that he was going to be a rock and roll star. Even at such a young age, these fantasies would make me sick. We'd spend time with him going from market to market looking for music equipment. The money he used to spend was extraordinary and hard to take. There we'd be looking at these Fender Stratocasters and Marshall amplifiers, all the fucking dog's bollocks of the music world, and we'd be dressed in rags. All our clothes were from jumble sales, our elbows and knees patched over and over again. How did he fund his shopping habit? Loan sharks, mostly. His debts still come back to haunt me now. Our names are the same, and I'll occasionally get investigated by companies trying to recoup the cash he owes them. The older I got, the harder this kind of treatment got to bear. I remember when choppers and grifters were the big things. Well, of course, we never ever had a new bike. On birthdays, I used to get £3.99 Airfix model kit. However much I enjoyed putting those things together, you could tell they'd come from somewhere like the Rag Market, which was Birmingham's version of the flea market. There'd be half of it missing. The cardboard box it came in would be so wet and soggy that you wouldn't have wiped your arse with it. Christmas was terrible. When we were older, Mom always used to work in a nursing home, doing as much double time as she could, sometimes not even coming home on Christmas Day. I used to dread Christmas. And the bailiffs would show up. We'd be evicted, Dad's van would be loaded up, and that would be it. Off to the nearest refuge or some of the social services pleading homelessness. He was always telling them that he was ill, trying to get sickness benefit. In reality, though, he'd be out gigging 3 or 4 times a week. As a teenager, I would be ashamed of some of the places we lived. We always seemed to end up in the worst of places. The ones that were riddled with damp, with nails exposed everywhere, the ones that had been left like pigsties by other families. I never used to let on to girlfriends. I'd make them drop me off around the corner. It wasn't so much that I was embarrassed about living on an estate or in a tenant block. It was more the state of our home itself. Every time he got violent, any ornament, any present we'd bought for Mom, a vase, a picture frame, anything nice would be smashed or thrown through a window or destroyed simply because it belonged to her. I think we built up a lot of insecurity as children. I used to find it intimidating walking into yet another new school. Academically, we were never in one place long enough to develop any kind of attention span. And in any case, Dad was hardly the kind of man to insist on you doing your homework. Only poofs did homework. The same way only poofs went into catering. No, he was much more interested in trying to turn us into the country version of the Osmonds. Diane, Ronnie, Yvonne, and my younger sister all sing and play musical instruments. They didn't really have any choice about that. Dad was obsessed. But something in me wasn't having it. I never went along with his plan. That's not to say I wasn't just as scared of him as they were. My tactic was to keep my head down and my nose clean. I never drank or smoked, and when I was asked to lug his bloody gear about the place, I just got on with the job. It's ironic, really, that people think of me as so forceful and combative, a real aggressive bastard, because that's the precise opposite of how I was as a kid. Until I was big enough to take him on a fight, I wouldn't have said boo to a goose. His favorite punishment was the belt. You'd get whacked on the back of your legs with it for something as innocent as going into the fridge and drinking his Coke. I say whacked. The truth is I would get completely fucked over for the sort of thing, but that would really set him off were lies. I'd lie about things because I was too scared to tell him the truth. Yeah, Dad, it was me who went into the fridge and took your Coke, and then he'd go absolutely fucking ballistic. Of course, what I didn't realize at the time was that it wasn't so much the Coke he was bothered about as the fact that he wouldn't have a mixer for his precious Bacardi. He was the kind of drinker who couldn't open a bottle without finishing it. You'd watch the stuff disappear and your heart would sink. This individual we're talking about is none other than Gordon Ramsay. So
If you didn't get it by all the F-bombs.
if you didn't get it by all the F-bombs, which, disclaimer, there's a handful of F-bombs as I read it. But this is his book. It's his autobiography called, oddly enough, Humble Pie, which is why I figured this would be a great book to go through on a humble hospitality podcast. This is, wow. Right?
Yeah.
So when you think about, and that's why I waited to say who it was afterwards going through that, because you think Gordon Ramsay, especially in America, you think about, the guy from Hell's Kitchen and screams and yells at everyone and throws ducks at people and makes idiot sandwiches out of idiots and bread.
That's still my favorite meme.
I'm
an idiot sandwich.
And so that's the perception. And don't get me wrong, he gets paid a lot of money for it, and he does very well at that. But when you actually, I found out about Gordon Ramsay, I remember on season 1 of Hell's Kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a great show. I think I was just starting culinary school, maybe my senior year of high school. I was starting to get interested in it. And I was like, who is this chef guy that seems to, know so much about everything and can just handle whatever. And that's when all these cooking shows kind of came to be. Emerald was still on, and it was
The
cool
Bourdains
to
and
be,
all
it was
that,
cool to be a chef. It was almost, for lack of a better term, the rock star chefs they were calling them, or celebrity chef was starting to become a household term. You know? And then so I remember watching that, and I was like, who is this guy? And then so somehow I found some of his his old British shows, Kitchen Nightmares on BBC America. And they were playing those, and they were much older. And then you totally saw, and anyone who's seen those and then sees, some of the nonsense that he kind of portrays today, you see a totally different side of him. You see a talented, skilled, caring Gordon Ramsay. Not that he's not talented or skilled now, he certainly is. But, it's more of him really trying to help people from his heart,
Right.
more so than it is, hey, let me be this actor and whatnot, which it fits him well. He plays it well. I don't know what whatever syndicate or station he's on now, Fox, whatever I think it was when I was watching it. But I'm sure they pay him very well to throw things at people. But still, the thing is
unless he's with the kids. You ever see the show?
Yeah, he does really well.
That's so funny.
But you know what? It's interesting because The Hell's Kitchen shows, they're most of them, at least last time I checked, aren't even chefs.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a grade school teacher, an accountant, you know, a banker. You know, it's
Yeah.
people that have like, oh, well, I'd like to try to make it as a chef, and I cook good at home, and,
Right.
and that's okay. But it's totally different
Yeah.
when you're doing professional cooking, high volume, and you're also working for a chef that has like multiple Michelin stars.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, oh, idiot sandwich, like,
Yeah.
you know, and so as I guess what I'm saying is as commercially entertaining as he's become, his story is awesome, which is why I wanted to cover it today.
Yeah.
So Gordon, if you're out there listening to my little podcast,
Yeah.
first off, I wanna thank you for sharing this and writing this book. Number one, number two, again, you know, it greatly inspired me, you know, in my career to keep going no matter how challenging it got. And then now looking back on it, it's pretty interesting, you know, to be able to relate to some of these things a little bit further down the road. Not so much on the childhood side, but you know, further
Yeah.
down the road. So it's and it's cool. And you know, that's the power of books is you get to learn and understand from multiple different perspectives, more so than your own. And you know, it's not altered or geared towards anything like a lot of the news information that we all are guilty of receiving now. You know, so that's why I like books. You know, get them before they outlaw the rest of them. I think would be a
For the outlaw writing.
yeah. I just bought 1984 because that's soon.
Yeah.
George Orwell, because that's they're gonna outlaw that soon once they figure that out. So
You're gonna outlaw, cancel everything, right?
yeah.
I love
We'll
Gordon
cover that.
Ramsay's.
We'll cover that.
Okay.
It's an excellent leadership lesson.
Good.
Go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no. My little tidbit is I watch Gordon Ramsay's YouTube channel. Is everything he puts up, all his content is amazing, and none of it is like. It's not him yelling or anything. It's just like 100 recipes to stake your life on, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's if you're ever already not salivating and starving, you go watch the channel because it'll make you like, okay, I need to go make more food.
I have the masterclass subscription, and
Yeah.
he does some really cool courses on there, and so does Thomas Keller, and those guys, they just put up some tremendous food on that, and it's really cool to watch, learn. Actually, during quarantine, I was watching the Thomas Keller masterclass videos. It just got me through quarantine, and then I just started cooking. I'm like, I'm just gonna cook good food through quarantine. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna finish the last little section here of his dad in the first chapter, and we're gonna continue on, because I think this paints like a really good picture of, you know, when you look at him now, he's got the TV shows, the restaurants, the houses, that he's got a tremendous
Yeah.
family, and it's real easy to be like, oh, look how successful he is because he's Gordon Ramsay, but when you realize that, I mean, where he came from an abusive alcoholic father
Yeah.
that beat him, beat his mom, beat his siblings, didn't support him any way whatsoever. They were homeless,
Yeah.
staying in shelters, staying in the council homes, from best I can understand, is you know, government housing. You know what I mean? And I mean, I think what's great about this is it shows. And there's a lot of people that have come through the route of hospitality that have had either poor childhoods. They've had, you know, maybe they made some mistakes in their late teens, early 20s that got them in trouble with the law or with substance or whatever the case may be, and they were able to channel so much focus and energy in, whether it's in food, whether it's in beverage, whether it's on service, you know, and overcome these obstacles and become some of the country's or even the world's best and leading chefs, restaurateurs, whatever. And that's also kind of why I like to relate this industry as the last form of piracy, because really, like we learned from John Maxwell, the law of the lid is you set your own lid in this industry.
Right.
You don't listen. I didn't go to college.
Yeah.
That's culinary school. I don't have a 4-year degree.
Yep.
I don't have any of that stuff, and we're building and growing and still doing, because the barrier to entry is your will
Right.
of what you want to put into it and what you want to learn. And it's not like, I'm not going to go get hired at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
That's where I need X amount of schooling. I'm not going to go be a brain surgeon tomorrow.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I can learn, build, apply, and do without having to have massive mountains of student debt. With you just need to have grit and tenacity and focus and fortitude, which most people these days don't have. Like, oh, it's as soon as they get uncomfortable, like, oh nope, I quit.
Yeah.
Nope, I'm done.
Yeah, it's
too
a wrap.
hard. My foot hurts. Nope, I can't do it. You know what I mean? Like it's.
But I hurt
it's,
my thumb.
Right. Exactly. So but that's where. But I think that's true in any career. What do you want to get out of it? Put into
Right.
it. Have the fortitude to stick through the challenging times, the difficult times, the uncomfortable times, and push through, because that's the test. That's the trial.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't stick through it, if you don't push through it and learn from it and get stronger from it, it's not going to happen. What's better, to be capable or not capable?
Capable, yes.
Capable, right?
Yeah.
To be strong or weak?
Strong, yeah.
To succeed or fail?
Succeed.
Right. So, therefore, gotta go. Right?
Yeah.
And you have to have that mental discipline, which is why.
I said that, was it last week or the week before? That's the secret. The secret is you got to be willing to work really hard.
Yeah, you did say
And
that.
it's gonna suck. Shit's not gonna always go well for you. You're gonna have crappy days. Well, guess what? You have to push through them.
Yeah.
Perseverance.
Gotta persevere.
Gotta put that on a shirt.
Put it next to I found my toast chart shirt the other day. I almost wore it today, but I have meetings today, so I didn't want to bring clothes and change. I don't have time for that. All right, back to the book. It was in Bridgewater. It was in Bridgewater that he committed the final transgression and departed our lives, almost for good, if not quite. It's a time I cannot think about without feeling the blood pulsing in my temples, though I was not even there when it happened. I'm not sure what I'd have done if I had been. Dad had had a couple of drinks, but he clearly knew what he was doing. This attack was calculated, clever, excuse me, even not some dumb, drunken rage. He came home from work one night, and he just started. There was no trigger. Mom was in bed with a mug of hot milk. He poured it all over her, and as she lay there, leaving bad scalding to her chest. Then he dragged her downstairs, and the beating started. By the time the ambulance arrived, she looked like she'd done 5 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. Her eyes were completely closed, her face swollen and pulped. First, she was taken to a hospital, then to a refuge. Dad, of course, didn't stay to face the music. He disappeared at first sound of a police siren. A few days later, I finally tracked him down. He was with a woman called Anne, whom he would later marry. Mom's been in the hospital for 3 days, I said, and still wearing sunglasses. Well, she asked for it, he said. That was when social services and all the other authorities got fully involved with a restraining order and was taken out on him. He wasn't allowed anywhere near the house. But when Mom went home, she found everything that she had built up and saved for smashed to smithereens. He hadn't left as much as a light bulb intact. Worst of all, Dad left a note on the mantelpiece, and it said, "One night when you're least expecting it, I'll come back and finish you off." Even after the restraining order came into effect, there were some evenings when Mom would be sitting in alone, the phone would ring, and she'd hear his voice telling her that he was on his way. Many nights he would have seen a patrol car parked outside the house just in case. How she slept, I'll never know. Journalists have often asked whether I loved Dad and whether I had any love at all in my heart for him. The truth is that any time I tried to get close, I'd just come up against this competitive streak in him. Later, my feelings for him hardened into hatred. Everything he did, I was determined to do the opposite. I never wanted to follow in his footsteps, and that's why I never picked up a fucking guitar, and that's why I never sat on the fucking piano. Were there any good times? Not really. I suppose the only thing that I really admired about him was the fact that he was a fisherman. He was a great fisherman. There's no two ways about it. But that even that got tainted by all the other stuff. Like
Real stellar guy his father was.
I got chills reading that.
Yeah, that's insane.
Again, reading it, it's, ugh.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even imagine, but I know that there's people out there that have dealt with exactly that, if not worse.
Isn't he Scottish, by the way?
I don't remember.
I'm gonna
I think
Google
he's
it.
British.
I thought he was Scottish.
I don't think he's Scottish. He spent some time in Scotland, but
Gordon Ramsay.
I probably should have done my homework a little better. Taken a little extreme ownership on that.
What the hell is the word I'm looking for? It's not ethnicity. What the hell? Ah, where's Gordon Ramsay from? Let's just do that.
Place of birth?
Yeah, there we go. Of birth. Oh, yeah, UK.
Not so
Johnstone. Huh.
So, where did Gordon Ramsay get out of that and into kitchens? Well, actually, he spent some time.
He's Scottish.
Oh yeah, see, there you go.
How does that?
United Kingdom's in Scotland. United Kingdom's all of the countries there.
I've only been to.
Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales.
Oh. I've been
Not
there.
the mammal, but the country.
Like, yeah, Wales, okay.
Yeah, I've been there.
You have?
Yeah,
Oh.
all of them.
I've been to Sweden, Switzerland. That was it. Well, Prague and then Italy, but never in that section.
It's pretty cool.
Now I need to go.
It's pretty cool.
Now I just showed everybody I have no idea where Scotland is. I'm Portuguese. I know where that is.
Earth.
Earth. Yeah. Earth.
Where's the globe?
Cheese.
So Gordon actually, he loved soccer. He still loves soccer.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually played in like a couple like celebrity matches and stuff. But anyway, a lot of people didn't know, and I didn't realize this until I read the book. I remembered it from reading the book, and he got into playing soccer when he was in high school, and he pretty much got to the minor leagues of the Rangers, which I guess is, I forgot where the Rangers play. Not the baseball team, but soccer, United Kingdom. Yeah. Anyway, he got to the minor leagues, and he was about to get drafted to I guess the major league of soccer of the United Kingdom. Again, it's my sports thing.
Yeah.
Not so much. So if anybody wants to help me out, send me a message or drop a link or something. But
There's so many leagues. There's Premier League. There's
yeah,
La
well,
Liga.
he was about to make it to like the league.
Right.
He was going to be on the Rangers, and he just kept getting injury after injury till he finally got one like final injury that just he recovered, obviously, but it wasn't the same. It really fucked his leg up, so he wasn't able to continue forward. So I got a little excerpt here that I thought was that I really enjoyed reading it. So here we go.
Boom.
After I'd recovered, I played in a FA Cup youth game, and it was there that a Ranger scout spotted me. They asked if I'd like to spend a week of my next summer holiday with the club. Fucking hell. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't the fact that it was a professional club, it was Rangers. The one that would really have an impact on the way Dad felt about me, or so I thought. The trouble was, Mom and Dad were going through a really shitty time then, and in a way, it put me even under more pressure. A part of me didn't want anyone to know just in case I couldn't pull it off. I didn't want to let anyone down, and in doing so, unwittingly make things even worse between them. By this point, I was 16, and I was pushing the upper age limit as far as breaking into professional football went. It was make or break time. The first week was hard. I didn't have a good time at all. I had an English accent for one thing, so basically they just kicked the shit out of me for that. And they also made me use my right leg, which was fucking useless. He's left-handed.
Yeah. Well,
We weren't allowed to rely on only one foot in much the same way as in the kitchen, you must be able to chop with both hands. I'm naturally left-handed, but I can chop and peel with my right hand, so if I cut myself, I'm okay. I'm prepared. Loved that part, because how many times do I see a cook, they're chopping and then they cut their finger and they can't work, I have to go home. and talk about like tenacity and grit and perseverance. Like this is how people how the good chefs were trained back in the day, but back in the 80s
Right.
and prior, even 90s. I mean, coming up when I started to learn, I learned that chop with both hands, peel with both hands, crack eggs with both hands.
Right.
And half of that was just to go faster.
right.
But yeah, it's like, you get bandage it up, throw some gloves on, and keep going, because service doesn't end.
That's like when we were shooting, and our instructor's wife was like, "That gun's on the wrong side," and I was like, "No, I'm ambidextrous." She was like, "What?" I was like, "Yep,
Yeah.
I'm good." And even Larry was like, "Oh yeah, that's right." He's like, "I forgot all about that."
No, it's
you got to be able to do
It's
it.
good to be trained. When I did martial arts, it was like, you got to train with both sides, because what happens if, I don't know, like, look, I pulled a muscle. What happens? You know, you got to be able to function on both sides. So, so it made sense. And I think, you know, when I read this the first time, I really enjoyed reading that part, because I was just learning then. And I don't know, it just, there's a lot of that just resonated with me, like, oh, there's more to it than, oh, I cut myself, I gotta go home. And it's like, no, because at the end of the day, your team needs you.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, obviously, if you have a catastrophic accident,
Yeah,
yes.
if you cut your actual finger off, yeah.
But, you know, you nick yourself and you're like, oh, you know, it's bandage it up, keep going, use your other hand. Get over it. No factor.
No factor.
So, going on. So I spoke a little bit about his, but then it's like, oh, well, Kyle, you just said, you know, he got an injury that took him out of the game. Well, because, yeah, he was physically unable to.
Yeah.
So here, we're going to cover that in a second. Then disaster. The pity of it is that my football career effectively came to an end in a training session. One of those bizarre training accidents where you barely realize what it is you have done. I smashed my cartilage, seriously damaging my knee, and stupidly, I tried to play on. There had been one of those horrendous tackles that makes you even more determined not to give up. I would do whatever I was asked to do, no question. We went on to take penalties with our right foot. I'll never forget it. We had to put a trainer on our left foot and a football boot on our right. The idea was to make your right foot work constantly. So first there was a penalty competition, and then afterwards we had to take corners with our right foot. It must have been nearly 4 o'clock when they finally said, right, we're going to divide into 2 teams of 11 and play 15 minutes each way, and I want you all to give it everything you fucking got. By this time, we'd been training all day. Well, that was a big mistake. By the time we finished, I was in a serious amount of pain. Afterwards, I should still have been resting up, but I tried to get back into the game too quickly. I was out for 11 long weeks, getting more and more paranoid, terrified that someone else would take my place on the bench. But no sooner was I up and running again than I played a game of squash. That was a really dumb thing to do. I tore a cruciate ligament during this time and was in plaster for another 4 months. I worried that I wouldn't regain my match fitness. Once the plaster came off, I started training like a demon, but I was still in a lot of pain, though I tried to ignore it. After training sessions, I would spend hours in hot and cold baths trying to ease the pain to reduce any swelling. Deep down, I think I knew I was in trouble, but I pushed those kinds of thoughts to the back of my mind. I would tell myself maybe all players are in this much pain, or maybe I can work through it. I was determined to put in a third appearance for the first team, and in order to do that, I had to ignore the message my body was trying to send me. But come the start of the new season, there was no getting away from it. My leg was just not the same, and this had become apparent to my bosses. Jack Wallace, the club's manager, and his assistant Archie Knox called me into their office one Friday morning to give me the bad news. It was all over for me. I was not going to be signed. I was not even going to play European or even first division football. I remember their words coming at me like physical blows. It was so hard to take, but I was determined not to show how broken I felt inside. Years of standing up to Dad had put me in a good stead for this performance. I might have wanted to cry or to shout or to punch the nearest wall, but I was damned if I was going to in front of these two. I admired Jock, and I had always been intimidated by him. I certainly wasn't going to let the side down now. I gripped my chair and waited for the whole thing to be over. In those few minutes, all my dreams died. Part of me was wondering how I would manage to walk out of the room. There's a little bit more here. They suggested I do more physio and maybe sign with a different club, one in a lower league. So did my father. In fact, he was pathetically eager that I take his advice. I don't think he could bear to lose sight of the dreams he had for me. He wanted the good times to roll. He wanted to be able to boast to his so-called friends who had always been so much more of a success in life than him. Dad was sitting in his van just outside the ground when Wallace broke the news to me. Going out there and telling him was one of the toughest things I ever had done. But I wouldn't let him have the pleasure of seeing me cry, either. On and on he went. You carry on badgering Rangers, he said. You prove to them you are fit again. But far harder to take was his lack of sympathy for me. He didn't have a single kind word for me that day, not even so much as a gentle pat on the shoulder. Later on, he even suggested that I might be exaggerating the extent of my injury. So I went home, shut myself away, and had a good cry. I couldn't face seeing anyone. I suppose I mourned for what might have been, but I was also certain that I had no future in football. Scrabbling around playing games here and there, and working some other day job to pay the bills wasn't for me. I wanted it all or I wanted nothing. No matter how much promise I had shown, I always I was always going to be labeled as a player with the gammy knee. I had to let go of the game that I loved. That was hard because I had come so close to making it, and I felt bitter for a long, long time afterwards. But I was certain that I was doing the right thing and making a clean break. I had the example of my father and his so-called music career to encourage me, didn't I? There was no way I wanted to be a pathetic dreamer like him for the rest of my life. The very idea disgusted me, and I wanted to be the best at whatever I did, not the kind of guy that people secretly laughed at behind his back. I needed a new challenge. The only question was, what would that be?
That's crazy.
Right? So, I mean, there's so much in there.
My brother went through some crap like that. Not like with my dad or anything, but my brother took he was a catcher in baseball, and he took a 92-mile-an-hour baseball to the face because the only reason he knows that is because he was catching this kid in the bullpen and he was told the kid, hey, hold on, he didn't hear him, and the scouts were watching this kid. The kid plays for the Braves still.
He
And
didn't have his catcher's mask
no,
on?
he had it up because he was like watching. He was like, yeah, hold on. And they were like watching whatever happened with the game, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And the dude just gets in his windup, throws it, nails my brother. He had his jaw wired, it was fractured in 3 places.
Jesus.
He went back and played like 2 days later and took a foul ball off the mask. He said it rang his entire face. It was the worst pain he'd ever been in.
Oh,
He gained weight with a broken jaw.
that's impressive.
Yeah. I was like, how the, what? But yeah, but that's, when you're dedicated like that.
Yeah, when
you
you're
don't-
dedicated, nothing will stop you.
Yeah, you don't care. You don't care about the injuries.
No, nothing will stop you because it's all here. It's all
Yeah.
in the mind.
Yep.
And if you're dedicated and you're focused, nothing will stop you. And so when I was reading that, so it's funny. The first time I read this book, I was like, oh, that's cool. Whatever. Here's this successful guy writing his book, had some difficult times, whatever. Well, when I read it again, that particular aspect of losing, if you will, reminded me of closing my first restaurant. Like for me
Yeah.
personally, and how I related
Yeah.
to it, because, when I closed, it was in 2009. It was December 19th, 2009. I remember it vividly, and that was the last day. And I closed the restaurant. And to be quite honest with you, I was too young to run my own restaurant. Anyway, I didn't know. I had good intentions. I didn't know. I needed to learn more and this, that, the other. At the time, I didn't know that.
Right.
Right. So it was very easy for me to blame it on the recession, or it's very easy to blame it on, the servers didn't do what I asked them to do, this, that, the landlord, the whatever. Right. It's for years, I blamed everybody but me, but I knew I needed to go learn more. And I remember closing it and thinking, new career,
Yeah.
new career path, something new. Like this isn't for me. I was very sour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I felt just like I guess I'm assuming how Gordon felt. He was on the path of like you're right there. You
Yeah.
know? We had done some catering things for some great people. I had met a lot of cool people at the restaurant, so I kind of got like that taste of almost to the big leagues, where I was my own boss for 2 years. And so I was like right there, and then to have it stripped away.
Yep.
So, and there was a time where I was like, I just want to go roll napkins, make my $100 a night, and roll silverware, go be a server,
Yep.
take it easy. But I did that so I could go learn, their tricks. Mm-hmm. So I could evolve beyond that,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until after a few years of, going and working and being virtually homeless.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some point in time where I was like, I had to live with my mom for a little while. You remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
And then you helped me move
A lot.
a lot.
5 times in 12 months.
Yeah, it sounded like Gordon Ramsay as many times as they moved.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're right.
But I guess what I'm saying is after I kind of got over that initial sourness, I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm
Yeah.
determined to figure out and learn from people. And
Yeah.
because you only fail when you stop learning, right?
Right.
So And I'm still learning. I learned stuff yesterday. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the best part about this industry is there's always something to learn. Anyone that says, "Oh yeah, boom, I made it." Like I got here, I made it. I got the title. I got my pay raise. I made it. I can
Yeah.
stop learning. Well, that's where you're setting your lid yourself.
Right.
You know, and anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, again, that's why going back and reading this book was cool because, again, experiences happen to me. When I read it the first time, I still had my restaurant, so I hadn't had that yet.
Right.
So being able to resonate with this and
And it is super relatable. I mean,
100%.
I know 1,000 people who did the same thing. That I watched their, you
Yeah.
know, their parents try to live off them or whatever, and you know, it's like,
Oh,
oh,
absolutely.
it's you know, with athletes
Mm-hmm.
specifically, but not so much in, you know, my other industry.
yeah.
My parents don't really want to brag about me being a world traveling DJ.
Well, that's okay. That's good though, because now people recognize you from the podcast.
Yeah, instead, yeah. That was so funny. Hey, I know you. Oh, where do you know me from? You're on that podcast with Kyle. Yep, that's me.
Boom. That's excellent.
That's awesome. So thanks for your views. And shout out to your roofing company. I forgot the name of it. It's downstairs. I'll figure it out later.
Figure it out.
I'll figure it out.
You know what's funny? Lindsay and I had a meeting last Friday, and we're going to be doing through Hutchinson Kitchen. We're going to be helping the Police Athletic League of Martin County.
Cool.
They're doing a really cool summer camp, and so we're going to do all the food for the kids for like 4 weeks.
Cool.
Out of Hutchinson Kitchen, all just good kid summer camp stuff.
Yeah.
While they're doing, and they have all these different courses. They have boxing, they have leadership, they have all these things. So I started talking to this gentleman Noel about leadership, and I'm like, hey man, I'm like, you know, we're super into leadership. I'm like, I just did an 8-episode covering of John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Come to find out, his wife works directly for John Maxwell for the John Maxwell certification of leadership training. So I'm actually going to go get enrolled in this and
Really?
and get in. And you know what? When the meeting was over, Lindsay and I we were covering other things and having breakfast, and she's like, Kyle, she's like, that was just like talking to you.
Yeah.
The guy was like
Yeah,
using
she
terms
told-
like figure it out, using terms like get
Yep.
it done, like all these things, and I was like, yeah, you know, and
She
he's
told me she was like, it was like they were nerding out together.
Oh, totally.
She's like, they speak the same language.
he was like everything rises and falls on leadership, and I was like, yes. I was like, fantastic, you know. So
Yeah.
but it works. But no, it's cool, and the fact that John Maxwell's in Palm Beach Gardens,
Yeah.
you know, it makes it really cool. So you know, they're like, yeah, we just had dinner with him last week, so we'll get him on the podcast one way or another.
Gotta get him up for dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll cook for him. It'll be fun.
Everybody eats.
Everybody eats. Back to the book. So, next chapter, Gordon Ramsay talks about, you know, getting started. You know, where does one of the world's best chefs get started? Well, I mean, the answer is anywhere.
Yeah.
Really, there is really no one spot. You know, Thomas Keller started in Palm Beach Gardens. I think Palm Beach, not Palm Beach Gardens, West Palm Beach, the Palm Beach Yacht and Country Club, I believe. His mom ran it, and he was the dishwasher there.
I just DJ'd at one of his restaurants down there. They had a
Surf club
yeah, is that what it? They
down
had,
in Miami, the North Miami Beach.
it was yeah, it was
That's-
it was
that's the
just
only
for
one he
the
has in Florida.
supercar rally. I don't remember. Yeah, it might have been that one. It wasn't like for him, like these
Yeah.
guys, whatever. But yeah, I
It's a
didn't
cool
know until like
restaurant.
halfway through there. I was like, oh, that's okay. That's what this is.
That's awesome. All right, so talk about getting started. So we've got a little bit of material to grind through, so I'm gonna get into it.
Boom.
Growing up, there wasn't a lot of money for food, but we never went hungry. Mom was a good, simple cook. Ham hock soup, bread and butter pudding, and fish fingers, homemade chips and beans. We had one of those ancient chip pans with a mesh basket inside and oil that got changed about once a decade. For those of you that don't know, when they say chips in England and UK, they mean French fries. Fish and chips is fish and French fries. Just for any I don't know, any non culinarians listening.
Is that the actual word? Culinarian?
Culinarian's a word. I loved that it made the chips. I loved it that the chips were all different sizes. She used to do liver for Dad. That was the only thing I refused to eat. And tripe in milk and onions. You know what tripe is?
Yeah, belly. Ooh.
Yeah, it's intestines.
Yeah. Mm.
I had it in Scotland. It was funky.
When I
Listen,
had
the United Kingdom is not known for like exceptional food.
No.
It's like innards and
when I had
French
that
fries.
place in Fort Pierce, we had a guy that would come in every Tuesday, and he's like, "I really wish you'd order me tripe," and I was like, "I am not doing anything with that at all."
yeah. Well, the thing is, you know, over the last, I don't know, 1,500 years, the United Kingdom was a bunch of peasants, farmers, foragers. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So, well, except for like royalty, of course.
Yeah.
But as far as like the general populace goes. Steak was a rarity. Sausages and chops were all we could afford. We were poor and there was no getting away from it. Lunch was dinner and dinner was tea, and the idea of having a starter, main course, and pudding was unimaginable. Did people really do that? If we were shopping at the Barras, we decided to have a fish supper. We children all had to share. There was no way we would each be allowed to order for ourselves. Later on, when Mom had a job in a little tea shop in Stratford, she'd bring home stuff that hadn't been sold. We regarded these as the most unbelievable treats: steak and kidney pies and chocolate eclairs. We were permanently on free school dinners. That was terrible. It used to make me cringe. In our first years, of course, none of the other kids quite cottoned on to what those vouchers were about. You know, I gotta apologize because I there's no way I could even fake doing a Gordon Ramsay British accent. But I hear it when I'm reading this. I hear it in his voice.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I feel like there's a little bit of a disservice to our leaders here. So just imagine it, because it sounds so much more eloquent, I would believe. But higher up the school, it became fucking embarrassing. They tease you, try to kick the shit out of you. On the last Friday of every month, the staff made a point to calling out your name to give you the next month's tickets. That was hell. It was pretty much confirmation that you were one of the poorest kids in the class. If they tattooed this information on your forehead, it couldn't have been any clearer. So yes, I did associate plentiful food with good times with status, but I'd be lying if I said I was interested in cooking. As a boy, it was just another chore. My career came about pretty much by mistake. I latched on to an idea of catering college because my options were limited to say the least. I didn't know if the football would work out. I looked at the Navy and the police, but I didn't have enough O levels to join either of them. I don't know what an O level is, but I'm sure somebody can Google it.
Can we Google that? What the O levels are? Thanks.
As for the Marines, my little brother Ronnie was joining the Army. I couldn't face the idea of competing with him, so I ended up enrolling on a foundation year in catering at a local college sponsored by the Rotarians. It was an accident, a complete accident. Did I dream of being a Michelin-starred chef? Did I fuck?
Did I? Fuck. Real quick. So he was here. Gordon Ramsay was in Fort Pierce,
Yep.
2000, whatever.
Yeah. I was
14.
in California. I was around there.
So I have a picture of him. It's on my Instagram. So he was at, it's not even called that anymore, whatever the hell the name of it was. So we walked down, we're walking by the jetty, and everybody's there, you know, there's camera crews and whatever, and I see him walk outside, and I was like, oh, there's Gordon Ramsay. And he looks, and he was looking for the owner. And he's like, Brian! And I was like, oh, he really talked like that. And he goes, the fucking computer doesn't work. And I was like, and there's just kids on the street. And so you see the owner come running over. He's like, get it together for fuck's sake. And I was like, what? And I was like, well, that's cool. I got to see Gordon Ramsay and all his glory.
F-bomb glory.
Yep.
No, you know what's funny is that's just, honestly, it's not even just him. Like, that's how they talk in the United Kingdom. Like, that's literally...
The ONA level examination certificates are the secondary and pre-university credentials in England. So he didn't have like the grades and
Gotcha.
scores.
So...
Thanks, Andres.
Thanks, Andres. Excellent tech support, research and development during the podcast live action. So, yeah, I mean that's just how they talk. So it's normal, which it's kind of fun because like when you go over there and you're like sitting in the pubs, and you're just like you just listen. It's pretty hilarious. It's awesome. The very first thing I learned how to do, a bechamel sauce. For those non-culinarians out here, it's one of the mother sauces. It's where you take butter, flour. Actually, we talk about it here in a little bit. You take butter, flour, onions, cloves, little bay leaf, and you cook the butter and the flour together, mix it up. Then you put the milk in there. It's your base for like a cream sauce. So it's thickening the milk, You can make it to different thicknesses and things
Right.
like that. But it's one of the mother sauces. Then you start adding different things to it. That's kind of like the traditional way to make mac and cheese. Because when you add cheese to it, then it's Mornay sauce and blah, blah, blah. It's all from Escoffier training in cooking, which he kind of invented the brigade system and pretty much the foundation of cuisine as we know it today.
Yeah.
The reason why the kitchens are set up in lines is because of Auguste Escoffier, which maybe I'll find an autobiography on him and go over that. That'd be awesome to do.
Yeah.
But he's pretty much the father of modern cuisine, which is pretty legit.
Yeah. That's a pretty
Culinary
cool
schools
title to
are
have.
based on what he put together and
Right.
did. Because prior, kitchens were just all kind of chaos. So the reason why you have a grill guy, a saute guy, a pantry guy, is because before that, you just had people running around doing all kinds of things. It's not like you had ticket printers. There's like, boom. But the styles were all different too. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'll get back to the book. Getting off topic. You got your onion, you studded it with cloves, then you got your bay leaves, you melted your butter and added some flour to make a roux. And no, I don't bloody make it that way anymore. I remember coming home and showing Diane how to chop an onion really finely. I had my own wallet of knives, a kind that came with plastic banana yellow handles. At Royal Hospital Road, that's pretty much his flagship restaurant. That he was the first restaurant that won 3 Michelin stars. So at Royal Hospital Road, I can't talk. At Royal Hospital Road, we wouldn't even use those to clean the shit off the back of a nonstick pan, let alone chop with them. But we were so proud of them and of our chef's whites. I treated my knives and my whites with exactly the same love and reverence as I used to my football boots. I sent a picture of me in my big white chef's hat to my mom up in Glasgow. I think she still has it. I was so fucking proud. So that's cool. He took his passion from football and put it into or soccer and put it into cooking. Boom. Started to figure out how to channel and harness that determination and energy, right? Meanwhile, I had a couple of weekend jobs. The first was in a curry house in Stratford, washing up. The kitchen there wasn't the cleanest place in the world, and they worked me into the ground. Then in Banbury, Diane got me a job working in the hotel where she was a waitress. Again, I was only washing up, but that was when I first got the idea of becoming a chef. I was in the kitchen, listening to all the noise, and I was fascinated. I couldn't believe the way people were shouting at each other. I was working like a fucking donkey, but the time used to fly by. I was enraptured. I can totally relate to that.
We're so getting canceled.
Listen, that's why I fell in love with the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
So when I read that, even the first time, I was like, yeah, this is cool. And like, I'll even
Yeah, the noise, it's
awesome.
crazy. Yeah.
And being an only child for me, all of a sudden when I started working at Lefties, now I had like 30 brothers and sisters, and I was like, this is cool. It's like action. People are throwing shit everywhere. I'm like, this is fun. There's hot stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is slightly dangerous, slightly cool.
You thrive on chaos. I
do.
swear.
You know why? Chaos creates opportunity.
Of course it does. Yes.
Chaos creates opportunity. The universe is constant change. So change is equal. You read some physics books. Change is chaos, which leads you to the next progression, which is cool. So that's why you got to be like. That's why people say, life is like you got to be a cork riding a wave, right? Because you got to rise and fall with the crests and valleys of it. But if
Right.
you're tethered to it, when that wave comes, it's gonna cover you and drown you. Right?
Yeah.
So you got to.
I get it.
It's fun. Hence
Physics.
physics.
It's physics, Chep.
Listen, if it works molecularly, it should work physically, right?
Yeah.
Boom.
Are we going to start a
theory.
physics podcast?
We should. We're going to need a lot more credibility for that.
Yeah.
I've only read some books as a fan. I don't know enough to
I don't know.
break it down.
I don't know enough about physics to talk
Quarks
about
and
it.
neutrinos and wormholes. And they just discovered some cool stuff about light. Something about light being a liquid or something. I don't know. I just read an article.
Great.
Back to washing dishes. After a year, one of my tutors suggested to me that I start working full-time and attend college only on a day release basis. I'd made good progress. That said, I was by no means the best kid in the class. In college, you can spot the students from the council estate, the ones who are basically middle class, and the ones whose parents are so in love with their daughters that they send them to cookery school. God knows why. There are 3 tiers, and you can spot them a mile off. I was in the first group. I didn't get distinctions, and I wasn't student of the year, but I did keep my head down, and I did work my bollocks off. I pushed myself beyond belief. I was happy to learn the basics. I didn't find it demeaning at all. So I started to work as a commie at the place where I'd been washing up. No, not communist. Commie is basically a low entry kitchen position where in a traditional brigade system, we don't have them here anymore. I mean, we do in like country clubs and big hotels, but in a regular restaurant, a commie chef, like for example, if I'm a chef de partie, which means I'm a chef of a particular station, like I'm the grill guy, right? You're going to be my commie chef, which means you're the guy that helps me stock, helps me rotate, helps me peel and chop vegetables, and you help me set up, break down, and clean my kitchen, clean my station. How that works is the idea is you're going to be my next replacement, so that I can go into either another station or learn other stations, and then continue to climb the chain of command, as in go into sous chef, chef de cuisine, et cetera, right? So that's kind of how, especially back in the 70s and 80s, how these kitchens are set up, and they're still set up like that in England predominantly. So started washing up at the Roxborough House Hotel. The dining room was pink walls, pink linen. All the waiters were French and Italian, and all the cooks were English. My first chef was this 20-stone bald guy. I believe stone, I don't know how many pounds stone is, but 20 stone is pretty heavy. Bald guy named Andy Rogers. He was an absolute shire horse, the kind of guy who would tell you off without ever explaining why. Dear God, the kind of food that he encouraged us to turn out. I shudder to think of it. The cooking was shocking, the menu hilarious. Take the roast potatoes. They started off in the deep fat fryer, and then they were sprinkled with bistro granules before they went into the oven to make sure they were nice and brown. Extraordinary. The foie gras was all tinned. We used to serve mushroom stuffed with camembert. One of the dishes was called a scallop of veal cordon bleu. It was basically a piece of veal wrapped around a ball of grated Gruyere and ham. I knew it was all atrocious even then. I was getting all this information in college, and I would come back and try to apply it. I'd say, you know, there's a shortcut. To make fish stock, you should only cook it for 20 minutes, otherwise it will get cloudy, and then you should let it rest before you pass it through a sieve, because he was in culinary school. Or it'll go cloudy again. For this, I would get roundly bollocked by the chef. He didn't give a fuck for college. I stayed for about 6 months, and then when I got the job in a really good place called the Wickham Arms in a small village in Oxfordshire. The owners were Paul and Jackie, and the idea was that I would live above the shop, which was a beautiful thatched cottage. Unfortunately, things went pear-shaped there pretty early on. Jackie was in her 30s. I must have been about 19. Paul was away a lot. Perhaps you can imagine what was going to happen. This is, you know what? So I read this because we go into it a little bit later, because like it's amazing how much, and I don't want to give it away, but how much influence things early on and people early on in his career influenced him down the road, and also he'd come across again. And I think it's really important because there's another part to that I can relate to, not this part, but just, you know, having professional relationships or working with people, and then 10, 15 years on the road, there they are again in a different context, in a different manner, but sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but this part's funny. Paul was mad about golf, and he loved his real ale. So he'd be off down to Cornwall in search of these wonderful kegs. I had a serious girlfriend at the time. I'd met her at the college, but she was going off to university. So that didn't stop me. Basically, I was in charge of the kitchen and a 60-seat dining room, and I wasn't even properly qualified yet. I was making dishes like jagged hare and venison casserole, and doing these amazing pâtés, and just reading endless numbers of cookery books. Locally, everyone loved the food, and it became kind of a hot spot. But I guess that went to my head. I was on my own, completely free. No one checking up on me. I was all over the fucking shop. One day, while Paul was off on his trips, Jackie rang down to the kitchen. "Can I have something to eat?" she said. "What would you like?" "Just bring me a simple salad, thanks." So I got together a salad with a little poached salmon and took it up. "Jackie, your dinner is ready." And she opened the door, stark bollock naked. I put the tray down and went straight into her bedroom. For the next 6 months, I led a kind of double life. There was Jackie, my teacher, and Helen, my pupil. You know what it's like when you're young. It's awkward and clumsy. Sometimes, at least before I met Jackie, I used to feel that sex was like sharpening a pencil. You stick it in there and grind it around.
Oh, fuck.
But Jackie was teaching me all these things, and it was amazing. The trouble was that I'm not even going to ask you to shut up. The trouble was that Helen got some of the fringe benefits, which meant that she was falling more and more in love with me. Well done, Gordon. At first, Paul would only be away for a couple of days at a time. Then he started going on golfing trips to Spain. I can just see your face. I can feel you laughing at me. He's like, why did he just read that? Well, I put a disclaimer in the
Yeah,
beginning.
no, it's fine. You did. Yeah.
What? At first, Paul would be away for a couple of days at a time. Then he started going on golfing trips to Spain for more like a week. That's when it all got too much. It was getting heavy. Fucking heavy. Jackie told me that she loved me. The truth is that I loved making the jugged hair more than I did having sex with the boss's wife. But the only reason why I was in a position to buy and cook exactly what I wanted was precisely because I was shagging her. Things weren't exactly going to plan, and it was all getting too nerve-wracking for me. That he might notice, that we might get caught in the fact that she was always telling me she was in love with me. So I told them that I was leaving to go and work in London. She went bananas. I actually went back to the Wickham Arms 2 years later for Mate's 21st. Someone must have told Paul, because while she was still being flirtatious, he was clearly not too pleased to see me. I was in the kitchen talking with the new chef, telling him how good I thought the buffet was. There was a carrot cake sitting there, and without thinking, I stuck my finger in it. Well, one of the waitresses must have snitched on me to Paul, because a split second later, he came running in and shoved me hard against the wall. I should have fucking done this 3 years ago, he said. You know what the fuck I'm on about. He then took a swing at me, but fortunately one of my mates intervened, which gave me enough time to make a very sharp exit. So I ran from the kitchen, jumped in the car, and disappeared into the night. Hilarious.
Gotta go.
The next time I saw them was quite a long time later, when they turned up at Aubergine. We'll get into that, but that was one of his first restaurants. In the early part of 1998. They'd opened a new restaurant in a village in Buckinghamshire, and they brought their chef to meet me in Aubergine. By then, a lot of water had passed under the bridge. They had rung me, told me that he was a big fan of mine, and he asked me if I could come by. I said, sure, of course. It was embarrassing. I mean, I'd moved on. I wasn't just poaching salmon and chopping aspic anymore, but I made it out was good to see them all. But I made it out it was good to see them all. The trouble was they got pissed and a bit leery. Then, when they missed the train back to Buckinghamshire, they started demanding that I offer them a bed for the night. We did try to ring around to find them a room, but hotels were £250 per night, which seemed to make them even more aggrieved. I didn't know what they expected me to do. Ask them to sleep on the floor of my flat as well as cook their food? Well, I wasn't having that. Tana was pregnant at the time, that's his wife. So I sent out their dessert, and then I fucked off. At 1:30 in the morning, I got a call from Jean-Claude, my maitre d'. He was screaming at me down the telephone. This chef of theirs was holding him over the bar, demanding that the arrogant fucker who left without saying goodbye, i.e. me, come on the line. About 50 minutes later, I rocked up on my motorbike. I thought I better had, and I was right. It was total mayhem. There was Mark, my head chef, fighting with Paul, and Paul's new chef fighting with Jean-Claude. Naturally, I just could not stand by and watch Aubergine get trashed or my staff take a beating, but they moved towards me before I had time to think. Paul was going, I trusted you. How dare you? You shagged my wife. All my staff were thinking, what? I could see it on their faces. The resulting melee caused major headlines when the old bill arrived because there was so much blood everywhere. We all got taken off to make statements, and then when the whole thing was written up in the London Evening Standard, predictably, it was me who's supposed to have thrown all of the punches. It was all, I came to meet the great master and instead found an arrogant bastard. Brawl that was on the menu, and Ramsay punched my husband in the mouth. That kind of rubbish. I had to take legal action to clear that one up. I kept my powder dry until all the other papers had followed suit, and then I issued proceedings. I won, of course. As for Paul, he sobered up pretty fast once he got back to Buckinghamshire. He sent me a fax apologizing, and that was the end of that.
Legendary. So, jeez. So he shagged the dude's wife, and then the dude faxed him an apology.
Yeah, years and years later.
Yeah, that's excellent.
It's pretty good leadership skills.
Yeah. No, it's not. That's excellent chiefing, I'll tell you that.
Oh, man.
Man, it really makes me like Gordon Ramsay even more.
Right?
Not because he banged some dude's wife, but like, you know.
That's so funny. No,
going
I mean,
through the
trials and tribulations.
yeah, the
but-
ringer. I mean, I remember a restaurant in St. Lucie West I used to be friends with a girl that worked there. I won't say any names, but we'll say your mom used to work there, that place. And
Hope it wasn't my mom.
no, everyone there, like everyone of our age group, was like, it was just the Wild West of sexual misconduct. Like everybody was just, I could not keep up with it. I still talk to a lot of people from there, still to this day, and I'm just like, geez, and they bring it up too. It's like, holy crap. But it happens a lot in restaurants, so it makes sense.
I can only imagine. It does happen a lot in restaurants. It does. So he goes on. So that was a little forward into his story. He goes on to kind of talk about how he gets into London, and he starts working at a hotel called the Mayfair Hotel, and he ended up working breakfast. And again, he starts at the bottom. And this is kind of where he starts to talk about how much time and how many hours and how much he just devoted himself to the kitchen, how he would work on his days off. He would work, 20 hours a day, come in on his days off to learn, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to go through some of this here because there's some good parts coming up to it that really sets the foundation for how he really got started. Because at this point, he's kind of going through the motions. He's working here, he's working there. He's just like he said, he worked at the Wickham Arms. He ran the show, but he had no training, no credibility. Right. He was, gone through culinary school, picked up a couple tricks here and there from local guys, but nothing at a high level. Does that make sense? And I can relate to that too, because again, early on in my career, I had worked for a couple guys here and there, picked up some tricks from them, but really didn't get any refined training until after my restaurant closed, and I got to go and learn from, when I went to work at Smith Wollensky and Emerald's. Right. And although that's not Michelin star dining, it was totally different flavor profiles, techniques, procedures. And so that's kind of where he is at this point. So he sets his sights on London. And so he goes, I was second commis, grade 2 at the Mayfair Hotel in its new banqueting rooms as planned. I stayed about 16 months and I learned a lot. I used to make the most amazing sandwiches. The smoked salmon sliced incredibly thinly because I had to do room service as well. On my day off, I would work overtime without getting paid, just for the chance to work in what we used to call the Chateau, the hotel's fine dining restaurant where all the staff was French. If you fucked up during service, you had to work in the hotel coffee shop. That was the punishment. It was a tough place. If someone called in sick, you could easily end up working a 24-hour shift. You'd work all day in the restaurant, and then during the night, you'd man the grill and do the room service. At 4:30 in the morning, all the Indian kitchen boys would sit down and have their supper, and they'd go and pray for an hour, and you'd already be doing prep for the next morning's breakfast. In those days, a hotel scrambled eggs were done in a bain-marie. You'd whip up 3 trays of eggs and put them alone with some cream and seasoning into the bain-marie so it could cook slowly over a period of 2.5 hours, at the end of which it was like fucking rubber.
Yeah.
So I remember my first couple 24-hour shifts. They're horrible. It's exhausting. And it's like some people work 24 hours a week and they're like, I'm tired. Oh, I can't come in. And here he is coming in, working overtime, working out like days on end, and committed himself to just going through the motions, going through the reps. And I'm a firm believer, the more reps you go to and the further you're able to push your limit, obviously that's the more you're going to push your lid, right?
Right.
And when you are in your 18s, 19, 20, 22, do it then. Push yourself to the limit, because when you have to turn it on down the road, you can do it, but you don't have to do it for the weeks and months on end. You can do it for that holiday weekend, whatever it is, because you can push yourself. It's just like working out, right?
Yep.
But it takes, again, that physical and mental fortitude. This is a physical industry, Yeah. But it's funny, you thinking about, think about it now. I mean, because I remember coming in on my days off. I remember showing up early, staying late, and the people that do that now to this day, they're the ones that are successful, and they're the ones that are climbing the ranks within our organization. But then there's the ones who are like, oh well, I'm tired. I worked 24 hours in 6 days. It's like, and but then they're like, oh, well, I want a raise, or I want this, or I want that. Yeah, it's fun, and It's gonna happen. That's society these days. You know, a lot of people can go work for Uber and make. I mean, not in our restaurants because our restaurants are, you know, we pay very well, but a lot of people, for most restaurants, specifically in our area here, you can go work for Uber and make the same amount of money, if not less, and you're not sweaty and you're not handling hot things, knives, whatever, serving people. But again, there's a lid there. There's you can only drive so many hours.
Yep.
So I guess it just comes down to what do you want to do.
Yeah.
You know, and some people they work through the restaurants because they're going to school or whatever it is, and that's awesome. It provides that that means to help you accomplish what you want to do. But if you want to dive in and take this seriously, show up early, stay late, go learn. The value is in what you know. It's not in what you do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The value is in what you know and are able to accomplish, and how you can impart that to others. And that's the key to this. You know, people wait around for their boss to just bestow it upon them, and it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. By the way.
Let me just get my magic wand.
Yeah.
And boom. You know, you got to get out there and get after it.
Yeah.
Naturally, like a true goody two-shoes, I said, look, I'm on breakfast this morning. I'm going to make all the scrambled eggs to order, chef. And that's exactly what I did, though I got fucked when I came back from my day off because there had been so many complaints about how slow the breakfasts had been. But chef, I said, I have been a bit slow, but at least they weren't rubber eggs. They were freshly made to order. He wasn't having any of it. I don't give a fuck, he said. He only had to knock about 25 breakfasts off bills. I got such a bollocking, a written warning, in fact. But when he gave it to me in a funny way, it was helpful. It was there in black and white that I was working in a place that wasn't for me. A place where you got a warning for failing to cook crap scrambled eggs. I knew I had to get out. And that's where this part's cool. I like extra highlighted this.
Yep.
Because that's that intuition, and that's that little that's that inner voice saying there's more to this.
Yes.
You know, there's more to doing what we're doing, even though this is the way they do it and they're this big hotel. There's something bigger and better out there for me, and
Right.
and I think, you know, a lot of people they'll suppress that because they're like, oh well, this is how I make my living, and this is safe, and this is, you know, this is I don't know anything else, and that's where I encourage you to go out there and find that, to go out there and look for it, and take the meetings, take the calls. If someone offers you an opportunity, don't shun it away. Say, hey, I'll at least have a conversation with you because it might be for you. And here it was, he's getting told, make shit food the way we want you to make shit food or you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You know? So, but that takes a little independence. That takes a little fortitude. That takes a little bit of discipline,
Yeah.
which equals freedom, as you know.
Discipline.
Right? But it also takes a yearning to do something beyond what you're currently doing. And some people, they're like, hey, listen, I'm good with making crap eggs, and that's okay. But if you're out there and you're listening to this and you have that inner voice in you saying there's more to it, go find out what it is. No one's going to come tell you what it is. You got to figure it out. In those days, there was a really cool restaurant called Maxime de Paris off Leicester Square. It's probably Maxime de Petit, I'm assuming, but, you know, again, French, British accents. I was born in Florida.
Yeah.
Not even going to try. And I'd heard that they were opening a new restaurant in Soho called Braganza. So I got a job there as a sort of third commis chef, though I didn't stay long because all the food went in a dumbwaiter rather than being picked up straight off the pass by a human being. And a dumbwaiter, for those of you who don't know, it's not an insult. It's literally an elevator. It's a elevator for food. You put in the thing and it brings it up and someone carries it out. I just couldn't, which meant that it was always a bit cold, and I just couldn't come to terms with that. Oh, there he is. He's holding up his standards. But there was an amazing sous chef there called Martin Dickinson, now the head chef at Jay Shiki, who'd worked at a restaurant called Walton's in Walton Street, a Michelin-starred place, and he was just phenomenal. Oh, I think it's important to note, too, this book was first published in 2006, so it's about 15 years old as of, you know, the filming of this podcast. I suppose that when I started thinking that Michelin stars were the holy grail and that I wanted to work in a serious restaurant because Martin seemed like a god to me. So I have some notes here that I prepped. I think my computer, oh no, it didn't. So what is a Michelin star? And I actually copied it from the Michelin star thing because I wanted to make sure I got it verbatim. There's going to be a link that Andres is going to put on there. Where'd it go? There's going to be a link right here. Link at the
It'll be in the bottom.
So a Michelin star is the ultimate hallmark of culinary excellence. Michelin stars were awarded to restaurants judged to be of a particularly high standard. Eateries that make the grade can be awarded 1, 2, or 3 stars, and the accolade is much coveted by chefs around the world. The star system was first introduced in 1926 with a single star denoting a very good restaurant. The second and third stars were added in 1933. 2 stars meaning excellent cooking that is worth a detour, and 3 stars, exceptional cuisine that is worth a special journey. The Michelin Guide has been published annually since 1900 and was originally intended to help drivers find mechanics, hotels, and of course, good restaurants on their travels. So that's a really interesting thing that it's good to understand going into this book because of the fact that they're highly coveted. And when you talk about 3 Michelin stars, that's worth a journey. Today, it means like it's worth an intercontinental trip to go there because the experience is that unique and refined and basically it's that chef. Now, up until, Gordon and Alain Ducasse, which we get into, really started to dive into this and this whole culinary world evolved. Essentially, one chef, one restaurant would have 3 Michelin stars. There weren't a lot that were able to uphold that standard. So when you think about it in terms of rarity and experience, if that chef had the one restaurant was at 3 Michelin stars, if that chef got sick, boom, or like passed, that's it. You're not recreating. So there's that scarcity that drives that. And so Michelin stars were really kind of a rating, and every time you level up, I mean, it just that credibility just becomes tremendous, and the more the pressure. The more the pressure is on the ownership and the chefs and the wait staff and everything like that. And it's a totally different thing than what we do. I don't aspire to be a Michelin star chef. It's not my lane. But I do like to experience them because it's just super phenomenal,
What was it called? Bouchon that we went to in Vegas? Was that a Michelin star?
Thomas Keller has Michelin stars. I would imagine Bouchon has at least one.
Okay.
And they've kind of just recently adapted Michelin stars to the United States. Only certain cities have them. I think New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. I could be wrong. I got to double check it again because we're not going for Michelin stars. Yeah. I'm not in an area that gives them. I'm not looking for them. However, I will say this. Open Table, which is the reservation platform, has, again, I could be wrong, but I think somewhere around 30,000 restaurants in the United States on their platform, is in a way kind of morphing towards a restaurant credibility site, which is kind of where we have these 100 pins for that I gave to the team, because in the last 2 years, Kyle's East Prime Seafood and Steaks has been in the top 100 in the country for best brunch, best steakhouse, best date night. And it's different from the Michelin Guide tremendously because the Michelin Guide has inspectors that go out and they're judging you. You don't know who they are. They're coming in and they're looking for specific flourishes and high notes of service, food quality, presentation, decor, cleanliness, and overall experience. Where Open Table kind of comes into play and delivers a little bit of that value in a sense of how do we get those top 100 in the list? Well, it's based on the volume of reviews you get on Open Table as well as the quality.
Right.
So they'll look at the restaurants and they'll say, okay, of the top 100 restaurants in the country, who are the restaurants that have the most reviews? And then what are the top 100 as far as overall rating? And that's how they build those lists.
Okay.
So that's how out of 30,000 restaurants, and we got in the top 100
Nice.
of that. We've had it 6 times now. Three categories one year, 3 categories the next year. We had brunch, scenic restaurant, alfresco dining, steakhouse, date night, and American cuisine. I forgot which year was which category, but it was 3 and 3. So we got the team 100 pins to commemorate that. And so they wear them, and it's great because customers are like, hey, what's 100 mean? And then we're able to tell them, and it's like, hey, you're dining in one of the top 100 restaurants in the country for what we do. They're like, whoa. Now, are there different metrics people can use to make different measurements on that? Absolutely. But based on Open Table and based on our guest experiences and the volume of guests, that's how we get into that. So we kind of have a little bit of that, but by no means is it a equal comparison.
Right.
But it is another great restaurant credibility tool that's tremendous. Yeah. So our goal is to make it a third year. You know what I mean? Which means we've got to keep our guests happy, keep our team happy, keep everyone functioning at a high level, keep our systems in place. And that sounds like a little leadership, right? So he's talking to his sous chef that he really looked up to. Gentleman says, get yourself into a decent kitchen, he told me. This place isn't for you. Trust me, you don't want to be working in a place that serves smoked chicken and papaya salad. Get the fuck out of here. well, true life.
Yeah.
I would have worked it out somewhere down the line, but I owe it to Martin that I moved so quickly. I went up to the staff canteen, which was just a grotty little room, really where all the chefs would smoke, and I grabbed a magazine and I took it into the garden in Soho Square. Christ, I said to myself, there's Jesus. Because on its cover was a photograph of Marco Pierre White, all long hair and bruised-looking eyes. I was 19, he was 25. He'd come from a council estate in Leeds, and then when I looked at who he'd worked with and where, Nicolas Dennis, Raymond Blanc, La Tante Claire, and La Gavroche. Those are two really highly acclaimed restaurants at the time. I thought, fuck me. He's worked for all the best chefs in Britain. I want to go and work with him. I phoned him up then and there. Where are you working now? He said, so I told him. Well, it must be a fucking shithole because Alistair Little is the only place that I know in Soho, and if you're not working there, then don't bother coming. Pretty legit.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I told him without even really thinking about it that I was about to go to France because I wanted to learn how to cook properly. Have you got a job out there? Yes. No, not yet. Then come and see me tomorrow morning. So, talk about action.
Yeah.
All right? Here's a guy who's in his place. He's doing his thing, making chicken and papaya salad, whatever. And he's like, that's what I want to do. And then boom, calls him up. And then as we learn, he goes and does that. This part's really crucial because I think number one is, like I said, go out there and find it, right? Or take a chance or make a phone call, and do those things that little voice tells you to do. Because this part here is all about taking action, taking risks, following your passion, and you kind of have to take a chance. And if that is worth it, you're the only one who knows that. And if it's worth it, go and do it. You know what I mean? So I left the phone box and went back to the restaurant. I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. I turned up at what would become the legendary Harvey's the following day as requested. We're talking about the earliest days of the restaurant. It had only been open about 6 months, and it would be another 6 months before it got its first Michelin star. I suppose I expected to walk in and see him sitting at a table writing menus or something. Not a bit of it. I walked into this dingy alleyway and said to a guy who was standing there, "Can I speak to Marco?" The guy turned around and looked at me. It was him. "Are you Gordon?" "Yeah." "Stand there." I did as I was told. I just stood there for about 20 minutes while he boned pig's trotters. I didn't know what to think of it. Well, part of me wanted to go, fuck this, and walk out, but another part of me was so fascinated by what he was doing that I stopped noticing how much time had passed. Finally, he took me through the dining room there, sat me down, and gave me a coffee. "Look," he said, "we work so fucking hard here. This kitchen will be your life. There's no social life, no girlfriends, and it's shit money. Do you want to leave now?" No, not at all. So that was it. Next thing, he's telling me to get changed and come into the kitchen. He was making pasta. I'd never made pasta in my life. He showed me how to do a ravioli, he showed me how to do a tortellini, and then I had to go. "Those aren't going on the menu," he said. "They aren't perfect, but things are moving pretty quickly here." I was scared of fucking up, but it was almost like doing an assault course. No matter what happened, you had to finish that fucking course. So even if I was clumsy, I was determined to get there in the end. "Your fingers move fast," he said. "Do you want a job?" "Yeah, I'd love a job." "You start Monday." But Monday was going to be a problem. "I've got to give a month's notice," I said. "Well, if you really want the job that fucking badly, you start Monday." I was shitting myself, but there was nothing for it. Later on that day, I phoned him and told him that the people at Braganza were refusing to pay me my month's salary unless I worked my notice. I've got this to pay, I've got that to pay, I said. I'm going to have to stay put. What hours are you working? I'm on earlies for the next month. Problem solved. I did the early shift at Braganza from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then I took the tube to Victoria and then the train from there to Wadsworth Common, where I'd work at Harvey's until about 2 o'clock the following morning. I kept this up for the whole month. I had no choice. It turned out Marco's warning about the restaurant taking over my life was only the half of it. Sounds like the law of sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was either or you're not going to get the chance.
Yeah.
And
And
as we'll find out, this chance really catapulted into him. He learned so much, not just about food, but about resilience with the shit he had to put up with, that it was tremendous. He also potentially almost had to give up a month's salary.
Yeah.
And, I got to pay this bill, I got to pay that bill. But I think the important thing here to look at is at least Marco helped him find a win-win scenario so that he could serve his month, get paid, do his bills, work there, get him in the game. So that's cool. That's probably about maybe one of the only nice things that we learn about comes out of this. But at the same time is he was willing to do it.
Right.
And he was willing to, he'd get out at 2 a.m. to be back at 7 the next day.
Oof.
But he sucked it up and he did it. So again, law of sacrifice, 100%, like we learned in 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. So moving on, it was as if I was putting on my first pair of football boots all over again. I felt very low in the ladder. Speed-wise, I was fine. My knife skills were great, but everything else I'd learned I had to forget fast. Everything we produced had such great integrity. It was clean, honest food, and it tasted phenomenal. You'd taste the sauce 10, maybe 15 times for a single portion. Then you'd start all over again when the next table's order came in. One portion, one sauce. So in these high-end restaurants, you're not just making a gallon of Beurre Blanc and then just ladling it as it comes in. You're making everything to order from scratch, every ticket. It's actually pretty cool. But it was one of the toughest places to work that you could imagine. You had to push yourself to the limit every day and every night. You had to learn to take a lot of shit and to bite your lip and work even harder when that happened. A lot of the boys couldn't take the pace. They fell by the wayside. What happened? You felt that you had been able to survive what they hadn't. Marco was running a dictatorship. His word and his word alone was all that mattered. He fancied himself as kind of a mafioso, dark and brooding and fucking terrifying. He had favorites, and then they would be out in the cold. He would praise you, and then he would knock you down. He would abuse you mentally and physically. He would appear when you were least expecting him, silently. His mood swings were unbelievable. One minute he was all smiles, ruffling your hair, practically pinching your cheek. The next he was throwing a pan across the kitchen. Often the pan would be full, stock everywhere or boiling water or soup, but you wouldn't say anything. You'd wait for the quiet after the storm, then you'd clear up, no questions asked. Marco was never in the wrong. If you didn't like that, you were more than welcome to walk out the door and take the job in some other restaurant. But he knew, and we knew, that there wasn't anywhere like Harvey's. There were better kitchens with more stars and older reputations, but this place was something different. The first time I saw Marco pummel a guy, I just stood there, my jaw swinging. It was a guy called Jason Everett. He got bollocked, and I didn't know where to look. I mean it. He was physically beaten on the floor. Another time, Egon Ronay was in the restaurant. I guess he's some type of celebrity or something. I didn't Google him. I was trying to stay focused on the story. Egon Ronay was in the restaurant, and we had this veal dish on the menu. Well, Jason had overcooked all the kidneys, so Marco went bananas. Okay, Marco, Jason said. I fucked the kidneys. I'll go and apologize to Egon Ronay. I'll go out there and apologize. Let me go. I've had enough. He went out into the alleyway outside the restaurant, and that's when Marco said, those chef whites, those trousers, that's my fucking linen. You fucking take them off and walk around in your underpants. So that's what the poor bastard did. He ripped off his whites and his trousers, and he was bawling his eyes out, and then he had to walk past the front of the restaurant half naked. This is the stuff that these people dealt with, and now it's like, oh, they held me accountable for my ticket times. He's mean.
Yeah.
What happened? Culinary America. What happened?
Do you want to work in a kitchen where you're getting a pan thrown at your head?
I did.
I did too.
I did.
Yeah. Oof.
Pan, ice cubes, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I don't do that, and I don't think that's justified. But what I'm saying is, you know, a little accountability.
Right.
There's a dichotomy,
Right.
a little extreme one way or the other. But you know, nothing wrong with a firm conversation with it. Hey, here's the standard. Here's what we got to
Yeah.
do to improve. Leadership has certainly evolved. I'm not a fan of the dictatorship
Yeah.
style of that. But man, I was like, hey, listen, you've got 4 tickets hanging and you're not hitting the standard. And it's like, oh, you're mean. It's not. It's not the same. The trouble was that Marco made you feel as though there was nothing outside of Harvey's and that nowhere else mattered. And that's just not true. Even if I hadn't been sick to the bottom of my stomach of the rages and the bullying and the violence, I needed to spread my wings if I was ever going to become the kind of cook I now so desperately wanted to be. And that's exactly what I did next. So he ends up going to France. He ends up diving into... actually, I'm sorry. He goes into this restaurant called La Gavarche, which is Le Gavarche, which is French restaurant that Marco is also running. So he goes in there and pretty much he's building his career, getting his skill set. Now he's learning some French techniques, which is essentially the foundation of fine cuisine, right? Mm-hmm. Especially fine dining, especially Michelin stars. He starts back at being a commis chef. Every time he goes into a place, he goes
He's hitting
back.
the reset button.
Yeah. So he ends up going into a hotel in the French Alps after Le Gavarche. He works there for a little bit. Then he goes to the French Alps. Works in a restaurant called Hotel Diva. Mm-hmm. And so he's working there and deals with more crazy chefs. This was one of the stories that stood out to me when I read this book, 12 years ago. So we're going to get into it because it's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. So here he is, French Alps, in this ski resort, which is obviously pretty high end. And so one night we had to put on an 8-course tasting menu for a massive group of Mail on Sunday readers. I was running the fish and the meat, and my head chef, Alan, was running the bouillabaisse, which was the starter. Bouillabaisse is a seafood stew, very southern French style, a lot of fennel, onions, tomatoes, shellfish, saffron, white wine. It's delicious. He'd made it that morning, but rather than putting it in the fridge to cool down, he put it in these stainless steel buckets and then sent the young apprentices outside with them to put them in the snow. He's using the snow as an ice bath. The trouble was that it was minus 10 degrees out there, so the stuff was freezing over on the surface as it was cooling down, while beneath it was still warm. That made it fester like a bowl of yeast. Yeah, you put seafood and cooked shellfish in stew, and you let the top part freeze and the rest sit there, get hot from morning to night. And Alan completely forgot to bring them in and skim them to take the fat off. Champagne and canapes were served, and then everyone sat down for dinner. Fucking hell, he said. Get me that bouillabaisse, Ramsay. And that was when he remembered that it was still outside. Out I went. By this time, the buckets were beneath a huge, great snowdrift. I scraped the ice off, pushed my fingers into the bucket, and it was horrible like fucking hot Parmesan cheese. Disgusting. I came running in with the buckets. Give it to me, they're fucking sitting down, he yelled. You'd better take a look first, I said. Then in walks Albert. Albert was the owner at the time. Screaming that he wants to taste the cup of the bouillabaisse. At this point, Alan, the head chef, decides that he wants me to take the blame for the cock-up. No fucking way, I said. I will not lie to Albert Roux. Albert Roux was a very influential individual in the culinary world in the time. Lying is the biggest sin you can commit in a kitchen. Very true. Mm-hmm. Working with someone who lies to you is worse than working with someone who can't cook. Rather than admit his mistake, he brought it to the boil, skimmed off the froth, the natural yeast, and tipped in a bit of brandy. Then he gave it to Albert. Well, fuck me, I felt like an avalanche was coming down on top of the Hotel Diva. He went ballistic. Absolutely ballistic. He got a hold of the bucket and just threw it. He was aiming for Alan, but it was the kitchen porter who took most of it. There was saffron and tomatoes everywhere, bubbling across every wall like some kind of alien ectoplasm. The place was caked in it. What happened next? Albert went out there and made a speech, and while he made that speech, we made bouillabaisse to order from scratch. It took us 45 minutes. I've never seen a serious soup made so quickly. Yeah, I spread it between 6 pans, and there were 14 of us dashing between them, crushing it, blitzing it, skimming it, 80 portions in all. What a nightmare.
Oh,
Having fun yet?
yeah, dude, this is like
It's cool,
it's
though.
like PTSD.
Yeah, no, totally. But you
Remember
know,
the
this is.
mushroom magician?
Yeah, that's how I thought. I was thinking all about that. But you know, but again, it goes to show like how people will take a shortcut like that, or they'll, you know, hey, honest mistake. But then you're gonna serve spoiled bouillabaisse and then just skim it off and put some booze in it.
Yeah. Ish, don't think so.
No, that's shortcuts. That's integrity. That's, you know, and you can tell immediately. And that's where I find it challenging a lot of time with cooks. They're like, oh, it's okay. Oh, it's good. And it's like, but it's wrong.
Right.
Don't serve it. Whether it's cooked improperly, it's sour, whatever it is. And so many people in this industry just, oh well, we're gonna get by, you know, because I'm too lazy to make it again, or I'm too like, just do it right the first time. It's one of our core values. Do it right the first time with integrity in your work. It's that simple.
Yeah.
From the ski slopes, I made my way at last to Paris. There I went down to an even lower salary, the French government's minimum wage. Ooh, again, the law of sacrifice. It was the bottom of the bottom. Miles worse even than being an apprentice. But believe me, as a Brit in French kitchen, they weren't going to pay me proper money. It worked out to about £480 a month.
Oof.
Paris was wonderful. Scurrying around the markets, working in cafes, learning how to make lattes and cappuccinos, or turning out a decent salad. Just discovering how to do the simplest things correctly.
Yeah.
We just talked about that. But I was so hard up. After I'd paid my share of the rent, I had about 80 quid left a month. It was humiliating in a way, like being back at school and getting my free dinners. Under French law, my employer was required to give me back half of my metro fare. So every Monday I had to go with a little orange tickets to get back my 10 francs. Still, I had a massive sense of purpose. This was where I was meant to be. Gotta give up to go up.
Yeah.
My first job was at Guy Savoy, which had 2 Michelin stars, and when I first walked into that kitchen, I never felt so remote, so far removed from anywhere in my entire life. Everyone was ignoring me. Even the kitchen porters had no respect for me. On my first day, someone nicked my socks, which means they stole them.
Yep.
No one was interested that I'd come from a 3-star restaurant. All they knew was that I was a roast beef. I think that's a French term for someone from the United Kingdom, because they like to eat roast beef.
Oh.
A roast beef.
Roast beef.
ROSBIF. And as such, I should learn my place. For the first 3 months, I was in pastry turning out sorbet machines. The most exciting thing about turning a sorbet is, well, there's nothing exciting about it at all, about turning a sorbet machine, unless you count the fact that you start it the minute the customer places their order so that the ice is light and aerated. There were 10 machines turning 10 different flavors. I'd put together these exotic fruit salads and these amazing chocolate sorbets, and then they'd been taken to the table on a trolley. I would scoop quenelles out with one hand. Beautiful. The quenelles are kind of a pain in the ass to do. You need 2 spoons, but if you can do it with one hand, first try, it's pretty legit. The trouble was I knew how to cook, and they had no idea. I'd worked in 2 of the best restaurants in Britain. I'd spent all this time in south of France, but they didn't give a fuck. They weren't interested in the slightest. Not until my French was more fluent, and even once it was, I had to wait my turn. It's one way to check your ego,
Yeah.
right? The pastry chef was a little squirt. I had to sharpen his knives every day, and I had to sweep up while he was working. He'd shout at me, "Sweep the floor." It was obvious how much pleasure he got out of watching me sweeping between his legs. I had to fetch his lunch and his dinner and his espressos. Luckily, I'd taken a job in a cafe, so every time I put up a cup of coffee in front of his smug little face, at least I knew he was never going to argue with it. It was the most amazing coffee he would ever drink. If he was trying to break me, well, the bigger an arsehole he was, the more it helped me keep going. All right, so he used adversity to his strength.
I don't know how he dealt with all this shit and didn't knock somebody out. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Gordon Ramsay in person. That's a big dude.
Yeah.
He's like 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, but even more so because he valued what he was learning in that experience more so than his ego and his reputation
Right.
at the time. And so what I love about this part right here is he made that guy the best coffee so that the guy couldn't say shit to him. Mm-hmm. And it's those little details that make him strong. How many of you listening right now would be like, I'm going to make this fucking guy coffee? And you just go through the motions and then be mad that the guy said that your coffee sucked. He focused on those little tiny details that to most people don't make a difference. But he's like, you know what? I'm going to keep this guy silent because I just don't want to deal with it. It's better for me to make the best cup of coffee and to go learn how to do it than it is to hear the nonsense.
Right.
And most people are going to sit there and going to want to argue their point, their ego, and why it's not their fault that they're, oh, you're making me turn sorbets I can cook, blah, blah, blah. I should be on the line. And he's like, all right, this is how the game's played. Cool. I'm going to be the best player at this game and show all you fuckers up. And that's the way to win.
Yeah.
Which, can't argue with that. I mean, look at where he is now. He won. He's not making coffees for people now unless he wants to.
Yeah.
My time as king of the sorbets was a real test of my patience. I could have gone back to London, taken a nice job with some decent money, but a little voice was telling me to keep going. The longer I trained, the more that would eventually come my way. Sometimes it's not about what you make now, it's about what you learn so you can make it later.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's where you just got to be like, all right, cool, let's go with it.
I had that conversation yesterday. Ironic. Yeah.
In Paris, I learned a total respect for food and how cleverly you can make something out of nothing. Take a leek. Like the leek, the onion.
Yeah.
Your favorite.
Yeah.
At Harvey's, we would take a 40-inch leek and use about half of it. Half an inch of white stuff to finish a soup or use as a garnish. The rest of it would be binned. In France, you'd use the best white bit for the soup, and then you'd use the rest for a sauce, the top of it for a mousse, and then the very top of it you'd use in a staff meal. Nothing went in the bin. The way that they roasted the most amazing capones and guinea fowl, the way they cooked a calf's liver, and the way every afternoon every little arrondissement had its own market. The chef would order in small quantities, 16 tomatoes or a dozen shallots or just 2 sea bass. It was all about precision and freshness. My eyes were opened. The pastry section was downstairs. Of course, I was dying to get upstairs, and I was always eavesdropping from the bottom of the stairs, listening to what was going on. I hated every minute of making pastry, but you could say I'm glad of it now. We used to make beautiful caramelized apple tarts served with black pepper custard. We would produce the most amazing pink grapefruit terrine pressed with a coriander jelly and served with an Earl Grey sorbet. And there was a creme brulee with roasted rhubarb served with a fresh Granny Smith apple that had been frozen and juiced. It came in a shot glass, this wonderful green film to be poured over the brulee itself. It makes me sigh just thinking about them all now. They were just fucking fantastic.
I'm so hungry.
I know, that sounds so good. It took me 3 months to get upstairs. They put me on fish, one of the most difficult stations of all. A baptism on fire. Fish demands precision. There's no such thing as a medium or rare when it comes to fish. 30 seconds too much cooking can mean that the bass is dry or ruined. But the minute I was there, I was away. There was no stopping me. I swear that I had the biggest penis in all of France. The first thing that I cooked was a sea bass. The sauce was made from an amazing fish stock infused with vanilla. We're about to get into it here. This is cool. You whisk it up with a lot of butter so that it was almost a mousse. The thing I could never understand, though, was that from the first and only time in my entire cooking life, when we came to roast the bass, we left the scales on it. When you sauteed the fish, they sort of spiked up so it started to look like a hedgehog. Chef said that some of the most sought-after flavor was in the scales, but all I knew was that every single plate came back with the scales still on it. So while it looked amazing, it obviously tasted like shit. Chef, I said, I can scale it for you. But he went bananas, as if I was trying to tell him what to do. I've still got the most respect for Guy Savoy. He is the most amazing chef I've ever worked with. But to this day, he serves bass with the scales on. Bizarre. Other things of his dishes, though, were touched with genius and as if the bottom of the sea had met the earth. If that doesn't sound too poncy for words. I remember a wonderful crab risotto finished with sea urchin butter. Sounds pretty delicious.
We gotta wrap this up. My stomach.
When you're on fish, you're next to the meat station and you're opposite the veg, and timing is everything. So you're always watching what everyone else is up to. I was such a proud cock. I was always the first man to get into the kitchen and my eyes were always on stocks. Perhaps that's why Guy took a nice shine to me, because we were soon getting on like a house on fire. Within 2 weeks of being upstairs, he'd given me tickets for England football match. I won his respect. I don't care what anyone says. You have to work twice as hard as anyone else if you're an Englishman in a French kitchen. I was the first in, last out, and used to beg to let me make the staff dinner. The only way I could survive there was to cook my arse off, making sure that I didn't fall down, break down, or cave in. I stood fucking strong, and after a month on fish, I was as strong as an ox, and my French was improving. I'd been in Paris for 4 months, and things were moving at 1,000 miles an hour. I was promoted to a senior chef position, and I felt so special. But still, I kept going. I wouldn't take my half day off during the week. We were required to take it by law, but I just wouldn't go. I would come in and work for nothing. Half day was all they were required to get off by French law. And he would just be like, well, whatever, no factor. I'm going to come in and work. I couldn't do the fish because since it was supposed to be my day off, my number two would be working that, so I'd volunteer to go on the veg instead. Of course, my colleagues didn't like this, the little British brown nose, so they'd start blanking me or speaking so fast I would struggle to follow them, and someone carried on nicking my socks. A pair would disappear every time I used to get changed, something that never used to happen to any of the other chefs. Yeah, they were getting jealous of him.
Mm-hmm.
He was outworking them. Soon, though, Guy was coming up to me in the middle of service and pinching me or telling me jokes. They were in French, and so I didn't really have a clue, but I would wait until he delivered what obviously was his punchline, and then laugh along with them, and then get back to the food. English customers would come, and he would be adamant that they be taken into the kitchen to meet me, his little British chef, because he knew how homesick, how lonely, and how isolated I was. He saw through my arrogance, my pushiness, and knew how hard I worked. I was like an orphan there, and he stepped in as a father figure. People sometimes point out how in shows like Kitchen Nightmares, I'll always encourage the youngest chap in the kitchen, the porter or the pot washer, the little snot that no one else notices or cares about. If you want to know why, Paris is why. I know how it feels to be in a corner, unnoticed and uninvolved. It's true.
Yeah.
And you gotta give the underdogs an opportunity.
Yep.
It was a while later, after I'd been in this kitchen for a year, that I told him I wanted to move on or try another kitchen. That was when he offered me a job as his number two. I was thrilled, but I didn't take it. I knew that was, as a number two, I wouldn't learn anything, and I would have to show other people what to do, and I didn't want that. I wasn't ready to cap my training so soon. For another thing, I'd already been a number two to Marco at La Gavroche. I wasn't going to do that job for a third time, so I went to the great Joel Robuchon, where, guess what? I had to start from the beginning all over again. Yes, believe it or not, I went straight back to being a humble commie again. And this time, the humiliation was on a whole new level.
Gotta give up to go up.
Gotta give up to go up.
Evidently giving up a lot.
He goes on to kind of discuss the again, you got to get the book to read all the excellent activity. He goes on to discuss all the bollocking he got in Joel Robuchon, and that was a very hard kitchen to work. He still has kitchens today, restaurants today. I actually ate at one in Vegas with Trevor.
Okay.
And he obviously he's all over France and stuff. And it's pretty cool because, Gordon goes on to talk about, he's like, hey, we're both on the international stage now, running multiple restaurants, high end. And so it's pretty cool when you see that now you're in a league with your mentors and things like that. The dinner we had in Vegas was really good, super expensive, but it was really good. And it was cool. I would like to try some of the restaurants in France, but I think it's just a little more authentic.
So business, I need to chief that type of business meeting in France.
Yeah, let's do it. Chief it up.
All right, I'll chief it up.
So anyway, I'm gonna fast forward. He spent some time, maybe about a year or so, as a private chef on a yacht. I'm gonna gloss over that chapter. There's a couple exciting things in there, but you got to get the book to read the whole story. Again, I don't want Gordon Ramsay to sue me for reading his entire book online. But you got to get the book. Excellent book. Little humble pie. As you can see, I think he started over now 3 or 4 times after making his way to number 2. Start back over in the kitchen. Absolutely tremendous. So this is where I had a lot of admiration for him in starting over again. But this is kind of where this chapter is called A Room of My Own, meaning that he kind of starts to get his first shot at owning his first restaurant.
Right.
And this is kind of where things really begin to take off for him. So I got a call from Pierre Kaufman, the chef and proprietor at La Tante Claire in Chelsea. Remember, that's where Marco used to work. A restaurant with 3 Michelin stars. His head chef had just walked out and he wanted to know if I was interested in the job. Of course I said yes, even though what I was really after was a place of my own. At the time, La Tante Claire was the envy of every chef in London, and that included my old friend Marco, who, as soon as he heard I'd accepted a job there, was on the phone pestering me until one Friday night after service, and I finally agreed to see him. He said it was urgent, though with Marco that could mean anything. Basically, he was pissed off because The way he saw it, I was just making Kaufman's life easier for him. Too easy in his view. He saw Kaufman as a rival, whereas I could only respect him as a chef. Marco's star was still very much in the ascendant. He was going great guns at Harvey's, and he was about to move on to a new restaurant in the Hyde Park Hotel in partnership with Michael Caine. He was involved in the canteen in Chelsea Harbor, where he'd installed my old flatmate Stephen Terry as a chef. Why did I agree to meet him? Simple. He dangled the bait, the biggest bait of all. How do you fancy your own restaurant? He said. You know I've always wanted my own fucking restaurant. Well, meet me tonight at 10 for dinner. I met him at the canteen and we jumped in a cab. He wouldn't tell me where we were going, but eventually we wound up in Park Walk. I never even heard of fucking Park Walk. Then we walked into the restaurant. It was all galvanized steel, black paint, and it was called Rossmore. When we sat down, Marco said, all this can be yours. What the fuck are you on about? I asked. The chef's a fucking arsehole, he said. I was confused. I'd heard about Rossmore. It had opened about 6 months before and was still being reviewed in the newspapers. Yeah, but you can't just give me a restaurant. It's not yours to give. No, but my other partner at the canteen, he owns it. It's losing 10 grand a week. A waiter came over to take our order. I was hesitant. We were going to stay for dinner if Marco was about to stitch this. Yeah, we were going to stay for dinner if the Marco was about to stitch the chef up like a piece of best beef fillet. But he had no such qualms. Yeah, he said, fuck it, we'll eat. Then he ordered one portion of every single thing on the menu. I'd only been to La Tante Claire for 3 months. Kaufman was paying me well, which was great, but he was also turning out to be a bit of a handful to work for because my food was now at least as good as his. He never wanted to put my specials on the menu. He wanted his gray mullet and I wanted my red, or my sauce for the grouse was not as strong as his, and we were fighting against each other all the time. So in another way, the idea of escape was quite appealing. The following week, Marco told me he'd give me 25% of the restaurant, close it down, and reopen it a week later. I was horrified. I needed to give Kaufman a month's notice at least, but he was adamant. It was now or never. Christ, I thought, what do I do? I was still only 26, but I made my mind up quickly. I went to the Midland Bank, borrowed £10,000, and put it into what became Aubergine. Marco had no financial involvement in the deal. He just set the whole thing up for his own personal reasons. It was a scary situation. More to the point, I never did see my share certificates. I just got told that they were mine, and that was supposed to be enough. I started on a £22,000 salary, and I was supposed to open the following week. Fucking hell, I said to Marco. How am I supposed to open on the 1st of October when I've got no staff and no menu? Don't worry about it, he said. We'll do one thing at a time. We'll open up as a bistro first, and we'll cook your desserts in the canteen. It was chaos. I told Kaufman that I was off. He was unsurprisingly mightily pissed, especially when he realized that I'd been working in Chelsea. Chefs are like dogs. They don't like having a rival on their patch. So he told me to go then and there, and that was unnerving. Everything seemed to be happening so quickly. You'll be wondering why I wasn't more wary. I was just excited about having my own place. I didn't ever sit back and think, who's this? What are they up to? A lot of Italians piled into the deal, but I never questioned their involvement. Just let me cook, I thought, and I was also reassured by the fact that technically Marco had no share in the place. It was all quite hand to mouth. These were the days when rag rolling was still the in thing, and I remember mixing yellow paint with a little bit of white and then daubing it on the walls myself. We had a telephone in the bar that you had to put 10 pence in to make a call, and because the old restaurant was riddled with debt, we had to put up with that kind of thing. I inherited a mostly Portuguese staff. The first week we were open, I must have sacked about 8 of them. They'd stand behind the bar, eating their baguettes. If a customer came in, they'd stick their sandwiches on the bar and wipe their faces with their hands. I couldn't believe it. But I had a good right-hand man, or at least I thought I did in the end. The day before I left La Tante Claire, Marcus Waring came in. Marcus is now one of Gordon Ramsay Holdings' big names. He is the chef at the Savoy Grill, where he has 1 Michelin star, and at Petrus de Berkeley, where he now has 2 stars. He and I had worked together at La Gavroche, and he was on the verge of going out to the States to work for Albert there. He was just about waiting for his American visa. In his hiatus, he was going to work for Kaufman. I didn't offer him a job myself, although I'd have liked to because I had no money to pay him. I was prepared to be a one-man band, and I worked my nuts off. But occasionally, Marco would come in and help, together with Steve Terry. I'd be on the fish and meat, Marco would be on the sauce, and Steve would be on the garnish. It was like the good old days, and the 3 of us working the stove again. It was one of those nights that Marcus reappeared. He'd just come by to say hello. Who the fuck is this? Said Marco. So I told him. What the fuck are you at La Tante Claire for? He said to Marcus. Learn from this guy. He's just back from Paris, and he's got more going here for him than you'd ever believe. You should be here. Yeah, well, I do want a job, said Marcus. My ears perked up right away. Fucking hell, I thought. Great, Marcus wants a job. And by this point, I was in a better position to pay him. I'll give Kaufman a month's notice, he said. Marco's reply was predictable. Fuck that. You want the job, you start tomorrow. It's getting habitual. And lo and behold, that's what happened. Marcus went to La Tante-Claire early, picked up his knives before Kaufman arrived in the kitchen, and was at Aubergine by 7:30 a.m. the next morning. So then there were three, me, Marcus, and a sous chef. And later, of course, all the great chefs who are still with me now came through that kitchen. Angela Hartnett, now at the Connaught, Mark Sargent, who is chef de cuisine at Gordon Ramsay's at Claridge's, and Mark Askew, who is head chef at Royal Hospital Road and executive chef at Gordon Ramsay Holdings. I didn't know it at the time, but Aubergine turned out to be the greatest training ground for chefs in Britain. I think that's a good place to stop. What do you think,
For
Doug?
now, yeah.
We'll continue episode 2. We'll only do 2 episodes of this book.
Okay.
We're almost done, but we've been going out for like 2.5 hours almost.
Yeah.
So it's a good place.
Talking about food.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty hungry. Plus, we got stuff to do on Easter Monday.
Yep.
Yeah, no, good place to stop. And you know what was... talk to me about some leadership principles you got out of this. Leading oneself, huh?
Well, yeah. It's the
A lot
hardest
of
person to
leading
lead.
oneself,
Yeah, I
yes.
mean, it covers a lot of the laws in there. The law of the lid,
Yeah.
you know.
Would you have ever thought, all fancy, world-class chef Gordon Ramsay went through, like, any of this?
No. Nah, I wouldn't. I would think he was like, I mean, the persona they give him, rich kid, you know.
Yeah, you would
Raised
think that.
Yeah, you would think that he was just raised, you know.
This is what this is why when people go through challenging times at work and I say good, it's character building. Go do something about it. These are all character building things, because when you can get beyond that, then you can kind of appreciate those challenges. I remember one time for me at Smith Wollensky, and I was working my ass off down there as a server, and I'd work days there, at lunches there. I'd go work at night as the lead line cook at Emerald's.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I remember that.
And then any nights I wasn't working at Emerald's, I would try to pick up shifts at Smith Wollensky. And so, I was young. I mean, there were guys that had been there for 15, 20 years. They were 65-year-old, like old school Cuban servers. And if you didn't speak Spanish, kind of like how he didn't speak French, you were just low man on the totem pole.
Yep.
And so, whatever, that's where I learned Spanish, and got in there and dug in. And I remember one time the managers were like, yep, you got to go put all these, because we had to pull all these chairs down from out of the attic, all these like outside chairs. And it's like up the attic, which the attic had its own fucking attic. And it was horrible. It was hot. And I had already put in about 13 or 14 hours that day. Because Emerald's, I was off from Emerald's, I remember, so I worked lunch, and then I worked dinner, and I got off at like 10:30, 11 o'clock maybe, and they're like, oh, you're not done. I'm like, what? They're like, you got to bring all these fucking chairs upstairs, stack them, organize them, and I was so pissed, and I was like, all right, and like, I was a little brat then, and they were like, nope, do it, and I was like, all right, cool, so I had to lug all these chairs up the attic, then I got into the attic, then I'd bring them up to this other attic inside the attic.
Attic's attic.
So I know the chairman pain.
Yes.
I completely understand it, but
Dude.
but yeah, no, but it was all
You start
this,
saying chairs, my back started instantly hurting.
but it was I don't know if it was punishment, I don't know whatever it was, or if it was just, hey, low man totem pole, but it's all those little things that are character building that help you to persevere and I don't know, I just think that's kind of lost in society these days, where it's you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and that helps you build and grow, because that's life.
It is. Yeah, you can't. Woe is me.
No, and if you're gonna relish in your misery or rest on your laurels, you are placing that wall in front of yourself, and you're never gonna excel and exceed. And if you can't excel and exceed and build yourself up, how are you gonna help the people next to you?
Right.
How are you gonna be able to help your friends, your family, whatever it is? So that's why it's like, it doesn't, like, what did it cost me to do that extra work? Nothing. I got paid for it. Like,
Right. If anything, yeah.
a lot of people end up looking at it as calories burned versus dollars earned, and as Gordon showed, hey, I'm gonna go start all over again for the experience, for the knowledge, and for the ability to say, hey, I did it, and you can't take that.
No.
You can't take away knowledge. You can't take away experience. You know, if someone just hands you, you know, a title and a position, that could be taken from you like that.
Yeah.
If you don't have that fortitude, that ability to do it, right? If you're a chef, if you're a good chef, if you're a great manager, if you're a great leader, you will always be that, whether
Right.
it's on your business card or not. So if you get fired from a place, unless you want to, you don't go back to going and being a line cook or this, that, the other. That's what you are. And you're like, hey, I'm a chef. Boom, I'm going to go find a position. You
Right.
know? But if you don't go through that perseverance and build yourself and your skill set and your ability and your knowledge base up, and your leadership capital, it's not going to happen.
That's very true.
So I think it's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Doug, if people would like to help support the podcast, how can our listeners and viewers do it?
Well, I've said this 1,000 times. It costs $0.00 to share this.
It does.
And give it a like.
Give it a like, subscribe.
Just
You
like
know-
Kyle did last week. Here.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it was great.
You know, one of the things too, and I'll probably say this in the beginning of the next podcast, just because I don't know if people turned this part off yet. But one of the things that I think is important that we mention is, you know who sponsors this podcast? You know who makes sure this podcast happens?
Ayala Films.
Well, no, they
Us.
they do the logistics, they do the heavy lifting. Thanks, Andres. They make it happen.
Yeah.
But us, we do. Our guests do. The people that listen and share this and help support us out there. You guys sponsor it. So as long as we're doing this, you're never going to hear a paid for commercial. You're never going to hear an ad. You're never going to hear a nonsense, because I like the freedom to be able to discuss the things that we want to discuss. And it's important to me that we don't
Sell out.
sell out to whatever. I don't know. We probably have like 12 viewers right now. Or whatever.
I've sold out so many times in my DJ career.
Whatever, but it's gonna be about what we set out to do, about
Right.
leadership, about the restaurant industry, and not about whatever drink or whatever. Yeah, we're drinking Jocko Goes here. I like Jocko. He's a great mentor, and I need my B vitamins. By no means do we get paid for or sponsored by it. Is it a plug? It's good, and I want to share it along with you guys. And then he's got Sprite. I don't know if I'm allowed to say Sprite, but Sprite, whatever. Sue means fine.
Whatever.
Be happy that Doug likes Sprite.
My sugars is low. But yes, so you can share this, give us likes, like it on however you listen to it. I don't know if you have the podcast app or if you just do it through YouTube or however you do it. And then also,
Come dine with us.
yeah.
Come dine with us.
Yeah.
We've got lots of KyleGRestaurants.com. You can join the email list. You can get online for really cool wine tasting dinners that we're doing April 21st here at the Promenade.
Yep.
With Quintessa wines and a bunch of other really cool ones. Oh, Quintessa is the main one, but a bunch of other cool ones in that portfolio. It's just we've just got phenomenal stuff coming again April 21st. If you'd like to be in the video, Andres will be filming the wine tasting dinner. We're gonna have looks like we're gonna have the winemaker kind of zoom in for us, and you can buy those tickets online, KyleGRestaurants.com. There's an events tab where you can get to and purchase your tickets. You can make reservations in any of the 3 restaurants currently. You can host your event here at the Promenade, where we have over 7,000 square feet in seating for 250 inside, full kitchen, and excellent selections.
Yeah.
And any of the 3 restaurants open: Hutchinson American Kitchen, Kyle G's Prime Seafood Steaks, Oak and Ember. The Oyster Bar is coming along. I believe we're doing some flooring work today.
Boom.
We're still shooting for late May. We've passed a lot of inspections, so there should be a lot of
I'm so excited for
progress.
that.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty legit.
Yeah, it's legit. While you're on the website, grab a shirt.
Yeah, while you're on the website, grab a shirt. Or if you have all the clothes you need, but you need some food, or maybe you would like to make a gift, we have gift cards that you're able to send to your friends, family, loved ones, colleagues, pets, even, whatever you want to do. We are pet
Send
friendly.
it to someone you don't like. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, whatever. It's cool. We'll make sure they have a great time or not. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But we do have an excellent program going on where you can get an excellent return on investment. If you buy gift cards in increments of $500 or more, you are automatically discounted 20%.
Nice.
So it's like making a $500 investment, getting a 20% return. So you get $100 off of your $500 gift card. So
Nice.
if you bought 1,000, that would be $200. And yeah, interest rates are really low this time of year, so it's a great way to make some return on your money.
We know you got that stimmy.
Yeah, the stimmy will get you. It'll actually get you $1,500.
I gotta follow up with
$1,300.
with young D there about his picture.
Yeah, we gotta.
Yeah.
I need to bring some shit.
Yeah, dude. Have Kyle G bring my shit.
I love it.
That's awesome.
I love it. We need more stimmies so we can have more meetings. So, all right, with that, we're gonna finish up Gordon Ramsay next week on episode 12.
12.
Excellent.
We haven't been canceled yet.
Listen, if we do get canceled, we need to start putting together some contingency plans.
We'll just do it live.
I guess we could do that. We need our own server.
Yep. Whatever. We'll figure it out.
I can't wait.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Happy leading.